Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, once again, we are pleased to present our National Grand SheikTaj Tarik Bey as he presents It's Not a Request, It's a Notice. Know the difference.
Islam, Shalom, Vadamakum, etc. Miyam. One of the things we want to talk about tonight is the general concepts surrounding the judicial notice, as well as the appellation proclamation that has been used by Moors for the last 30 years or more. And more often in the recent decade, particularly in relationship to people's concepts of what they are, what they represent, and how they are presented and why they are presented. So what we're really talking about behind it all is really unfortunate realities. The unfortunate realities has been and are the fact that the Moors of the Western Hemisphere have been under hybrid colonial European occupation for a couple centuries and have had misconceptions about ourselves, misconceptions about politics, misconceptions about economies, misconceptions about education, misconceptions about anthropology, misconceptions about etymology, misconceptions about epistemology, misconceptions about metrology, and misconceptions about astrology and cosmology, all of which are part of Moorish culture, Moorish science, the culture of all Africans on planet Midgard Earth. And you will hear people make mention very often about Moorish science without an explanation. Often they are, when pressed to hold a position, they will usually start talking about a religious perspective or some worshipful perspective relative to Moorish science, as opposed to earth culture, which is really what Moorish science is. So when you're talking Moorish science, you're still talking about ancient Chaldea, Hittite, Moabite, Canaanite, etc., Phoenician, all of your ancient peoples of Asia and Africa, etc., from the north to the south of Asia and to ancient Al-Marak or ancient America. And you look at a conjoined and relative culture and a relative cosmological natured system of governing, etc., and the fundamental knowledge of the constitution of Earth in relationship to the constitution of man, etc., and thus the constitutional principles upon which we govern ourselves. Now, I know that very often when people talk about constitutions, their mind often, because of training, runs only to what has been presented in more recent days, coming from the Moorish Confederation of Anansi, sometimes referred to as the Iroquois Confederation, and the adaptation of Moorish law by the hybrid Europeans who've been occupying North America, which evolved into what is known as the Constitution for the United States Republic, coming out of trade routes and trade treaties with the people of the land who are of Canaanite, Moabite descent, collectively known as Moors, and the Moorish Empire, which is why you hear scholars who go into Western world politics and history particularly in relationship to the judicial operations of authorities and powers that are used in judicial structures, etc. They'll go to constitutional principles, but yet not tell the people that you're actually going to Moorish law or fatwa, although it's known. However, due to the fact that we collectively, being the people of the land, have been under hybrid European occupation for a couple of centuries, etc. Many of the people have lost cognizance of also the earth culture on Earth in relationship to human interchange with each other, within national forums and within international judicial forums. One of the fundamental rules that must be remembered and restored with us as a people is to remember that free will is cognate and primal to all of our agreements, communications, and instruments of contract that refer to or establish any what you would call judicial principles of law and execution of such laws, etc., for the organized government and the harmonies of man. The unfortunate situation that you'll see taking place today, particularly with many of the people of the land, is that they have forgotten that the hybrid Europeans who have been occupying North America and claiming to be Americans have been misrepresenting themselves as the legitimate American peoples of the land and possessing such sovereign powers that go with the pedigree of the American people, and the people have forgotten that they're colonists, and so therefore there's a misconception of the legitimacy of the actors and operators who have been occupying our land and pretending to be government for quite some time. And it's an interesting dynamics whereas you have to constantly remind the people of making the distinction between the principle of that which is de jure and that which is de facto. And very often that is forgotten. Now, the judicial notices that have been used for the last 30, 35 years by Moors, etc., is simply a notice given to persons of hybrid European descent who have literally, in organized fashion, which most of you who know contemporary politics know that they are de facto order or body of criminals and human traffickers who have been pretending to be legitimate government since the Abraham Lincoln administration, on the purpose and cause of avoiding their duties and responsibilities and obligations to all treaties in force from which that Constitution for the United States is derivative in purpose and in cause. Now, when you're looking at the judicial notice, you'll notice that we have inserted within that judicial notice 12 case laws dealing, and they're all under stare decisis. So keep this in mind, because we don't want to, this is not a subject matter on stare decisis and res judicata. But we want you to write this down so that you can go back and reference, because also I want you to be reminded that because of the fast changing politics on Midgard at this time, and the fact that nations of the earth have stopped buying U.S. corporation treasury bonds, they have upped their ante of COINTELPRO operations and trolling to try to dissuade people from dealing with treaty and constitutional principles to which they are obligated, and also mocking judicial principles, etc., as if they are contrary to truth and contrary to law. So stare decisis is essentially established law that is not contradicted or cannot be contradicted in any inferior court because it's based on established law and established judicial principles, etc. So stare decisis is a principle of established law that applies in any particular case or any particular subject matter or subject jurisdiction or and judicial issue or ruling that cannot be contradicted by any other court under the jurisdiction of the United States Corporation Company operatives or any of your inferior courts. And so there is no need to for such litigations to take place because it is established, as opposed to, as an example, where something has what you would call a questionable aspect to it, where it may need aggregate determinations and litigation, and whereas that might be necessary. So stare decisis is where there is no argument, there is no issue, any like cases or any substantive issues related to such subject matter in a stare decisis decision is already established as law, and as a matter of fact, not even supposed to be discussed, meaning that it is done. It is the law, etc. And res judicata represents the same principle where these things are put to rest as they are established. So on the judicial notice, you'll notice that there are 13 different stare decisis cases. And I think a lot of times people miss that concept, particularly people who are beginning to become conscious and are using the proclamations and the judicial notice, having limited what's called judicial background studies. And that's because things are moving so fast. Years ago, we had decided to make the proclamations and the judicial notice available to the people at large because of counteractions that have been taken by some of the members of the Roman Curia and the secret societies operating under the United States jurisdiction, including persons who are beneficiary members of many of the municipalities operating on the land under so-called states jurisdictions, not republic states jurisdictions, nor commonwealth state jurisdiction, but under states of jurisdiction, which is actually a foreign jurisdiction, contrary to the republic, contrary to treaty, contrary to constitution. And so, but in the rule of contract and consent in what's called trade and in international law, one of the things that the hybrid colonists have done to our people to enforce birthright theft and on another level, soul theft. That's another subject matter within itself because they're also soul thieves. And then you're going more into more of the metaphysical of also why they're doing what they're doing. And this goes into your higher level of the dark priesthood operatives that are part of these operations of the United States Corporation Company and their human trafficking operations, including their practices of child sacrifice, bloodletting, and a whole bunch of things which are not the direct subject matter at the moment, but are indeed related. So essentially, your proclamations are sent out to those FOFers, and understand FOFer is who the general operators of the United States Corporation Company actually are. FOFer is the feudal designation for persons who hold themselves as trustees over other people's estates, etc. So you would look at FOFer as being, relative to what would be a trustee, except a FOFer is more feudal as opposed to anything allodial, etc. And is usually a position taken by what you would call a belligerent trustee, or someone who takes a position of trustee with the intention of defrauding, stealing, misrepresenting, creating artificial methods by which estates of others can be transferred to their own cause or own reason or own benefit without letting the natural person or people who are designated as the true beneficiaries of an estate, etc., or an inheritance, without letting them being made aware that they're actually being robbed. So this is the practices that most of you who know jurisprudence has been taking place over the last century or so, with what is known as the 14th Amendment operations of the straw man, which some of you know as, and the nom de guerres, which many of you know, and the straw man operations of branding systems. And also, whereas the hybrid Europeans operating at North America on the land in a de facto posture have practiced in order to steal the lands and the estates of the people of the land and converting them under the guise of law or under a color of law, color of authority, and a color of operations to their own means, etc., and to their own service, upon which they have built the massive wealth that has been known in modern times at North America in the possession of hybrid Europeans who have designated themselves as white people, particularly since the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath of 1854 to 1863, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, and much related to the Whiggamore Party, of which most of you know Horace Greeley has had much influence on, with, etc. And also for those of you who have been keeping up with a lot of the counter actions that have been going on among the hybrid Europeans through their de facto political parties that have been operating on the land, known as the Republican Party and known as the Democratic Party, which are both branches of the Whiggamore parties from 1854, etc., dealing with more of the operations of the what is known as the conscience Whigs and the cotton Whigs, which is actually what's going on. So when you're talking about conscience Whigs, you're talking about people who play the coinage or take the flip coin, known as the Republican Party, and the cotton Whigs, known as the Democratic Party, which is also known as the Kaiklos Party or Ku Klux Klan, etc. And then also being aware that many of our people are not aware of the truth of the politics that have been operating. The judicial notices were put in place to interrupt the assumed practice of consent by the people to be 14th Amendment persons, which is really stock for the United States Corporation Company operators and owners, and has nothing whatsoever to do with any legitimate citizenship process, etc., under naturalization. And also it must be understood that the people of the land, i.e. Moors, cannot or cannot be U.S. corporation citizens. And that has been a contention of information and a conflict of concept among the people for decades. And because people are becoming more and more conscious of the truth of the politics operating on the land and what's been going on in the world, that has become more and more controversial as of late. And then, of course, because people are exercising their five senses and starting to figure out some of this corruption and have been nationalizing, etc., recognizing that the United States that has been presented to them was indeed not a country and indeed is not the country on this land, but actually a private corporation owned by secret societies under the Roman Curia operations of the Unum Sanctum operations via the Pope of Rome, Queen of England, and the Circle Church and the Chancery in England, etc., and then transferred jurisdictional operations and running the judicial platforms at North America through the British accredited registry, which you know as the Bar Association. And because they have created bonds that they have been selling to other nations, particularly since 1861, and really accelerated in 1862. This is the reason why many of you who start doing research will find a lot of what you call missing text in the congressional records relative to 1862. Of course, the people are not aware that the members of the Roman Curia who have infiltrated what you know as the Congress and the Senate for the United States, and actually had been secretly overthrowing the republic, which is really what you're dealing with today politically and economically. We're not aware that these people are actually agents of the bar, and that are indeed de facto. And therefore, there's some expectations that the people have had from expecting these people to act a certain way in relationship to constitution and treaty law, and then constantly running to what you call this brick wall of these people not only not acknowledging constitutional principle, but actually openly countering it and openly mocking and criticizing anyone who enforced treaty or constitution, because that is indeed and was not indeed their agenda. Many of the people never complained or countered or protested and or made any declaratory statements to the contrary, because they thought that these people were legitimate. However, with the politics that you see taking place on the planet now, the nations of the earth are starting to reject them, and of course, that's bringing more attention to the criminal operations of the de facto Congress and Senate operating on the land, who are actually organized criminals. And while that has been known, absolutely known, the people have become fearful of them, because they have actually sent out what you will call the local military operations to actually murder people on the street. Those contract murderers are known as the Fraternal Order of the Police. It's unfortunate, but it's absolutely the truth. And so whenever you had anyone who would talk about or even deal with enforcement of international law principles and proper contract issues dealing with free will, substance for substance, as an example, that a contract, valid contract, cannot be vague, that all persons involved or people involved in contract, they cannot produce something that's vague to another. You cannot impose de facto or vague contracts on minors, or minors cannot make contract, etc. And so they have set up a political platform, a de facto political platform, to accommodate the institutionalized fraud, and that has been known essentially as the Democratic Party. That does not mean, and that is not to say, that the Republican Party operating on the land is separate from them, because they absolutely are not. That is put in place to present the pretext of actually being separate, or that there are separations of powers operating in the name of government on the land. And actually, there are two sides of the same coin, and are controlled by the same entity operations of the accredited, the British accredited registry from Fleet Street, England. And most of that you all already know. But the point of it is that I want to present to you is in relationship to the judicial notice. What you're doing when you present the judicial notice to the major corporate operatives, say, as an example, the Inquisition Revenue Service, known to the most people who don't know the real politics. They call it the IRS, or the Internal Revenue Services. Those who know what it actually is, it's Inquisition Revenue Services operating for the de facto Congress and senators, so that they could rob the people incrementally, in harmony and in support, and authorized by the doctrine of discovery, which was initiated by the popes of Rome under the Spanish Inquisition, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, against the Aboriginal indigenous people of the land, etc., in order to, over periods of time, to drain and steal the estates, which is exactly what has happened. And you need to know that that's the basis of the poverty and the economic stresses that the people are feeling today. But they need to know that. However, conscious Moors knowing that put out judicial notice to put them on notice. The issue is a notice is not a request. You're not requesting them to acknowledge constitutional principles or the customs and traditions of the people of the land of your forefathers from which that constitution is drafted, i.e., honor, honesty, confederation, etc. You're actually notifying them so that they can no longer openly and covertly sell instruments on the stock market or around the world saying that you voted or consented to their creating bonds against yourself via the 14th Amendment operations of bonding, which is the foundation of the Treasury bonds, which has been operating for these decades, past decades, and have been actually at the foundation of their economic access to the World Global Trust, and upon which the economic system for trade, international trade, has been built. And what you recognize is that many of the people have not been aware that those treasury bonds that have been used to support the corporate operations of the United States Corporation Company was actually based on their own estates. And we've been over this like redundantly for decades. But I'm just bringing this up on another point because of what you find is many people send the documents out to the 7 different jurisdictions that are mentioned often on different websites and different venues that we have dealt with over the years, and expect a response coming back from the de facto operators. Or on another level, expecting them to put your documentation in their files, acknowledging your right and their obligation to treaty and constitution, and then finding many people being, I say, or alarmed or disappointed or questioning. Well, they didn't answer. I sent my papers out, and they didn't acknowledge or they didn't send a response back, etc. The point that I'm making to you is that you're not to expect a response. You're putting them on notice what you're doing by fact of law, contract law, and in fact of law of assumed judicial or what you call power of attorney. What you've done is fired them, even though you didn't need to fire them because they were never legitimate in the first place. But what you do, you create a paper trail by which you're making it known, publicly known by proclamation, that you are restoring or reclaiming your right of estate to yourself and to all your hereditaments, and that they cannot loosely or under any guise of authority, which they have already been doing and practicing, so-called represent you and your estate under the guise of being de jure government, which they are not, and continue their fraud, their human trafficking, and their child sacrifice practices that they've been doing, and then it be assumed by the rest of the world that you are sanctioning them. So you're not looking for a response from them. What you're doing is firing them. And that's actually in the nature more of a plebiscite and not so much a vote. So don't expect what you call a harmonic and agreeable response for them, because what you also presenting to them, and this is another thing that why we talk about stare decisis. You notice how hostile you'll see some of them become, including a lot of the trolls that they've been paying to troll us or to try to misrepresent what we've been telling the people over these years, and trying to make it look like we're making these things up, etc., when actually those things are stare decisis. But what it is actually doing also is causing them to expose themselves to you, proving that they are anti-constitutional, that they are anti-humane, that they are actually organized criminals. Now, you can tell the people that these people are criminals, and they, without a background in jurisprudence, may have questions or may look at it from the perspective of what is that your or my or someone's opinion one way or another. And in fact, that's not the case. The issue is that they're proving to you that they're de facto. And so this is another reason you're putting the judicial notice out. So understand, a notice is not a request. You're not asking them for anything. Why? Because number one, rights are not given, rights are claimed. Governments were never structured to give rights. They don't have that authority. They do not have that delegated authority. It is not within the structure of government to give rights. They don't have rights to give. Governments are in place to secure rights pre-existing, i.e., what is commonly known also as unalienable rights. So it means there can be no lien on it. That means anything relative to unalienable rights, such as rights of travel or liberties, etc., are divine in their nature, or what some people would refer to as God-given, which is a term implying divine order, having nothing to do with government whatsoever. And that is what unalienable rights relate to. It's also what birthright relates to. And so what you find is these breaches have been made all across the board in relationship to the people's rights, the people's liberties, the people's hereditaments, etc. And they have been falsely hiding their criminality behind the terms racism and prejudice. And the people have been arguing racism and prejudice rather than birthright theft, soul theft, hereditament theft, etc., which indicates that they were not necessarily sharp on the issue of jurisprudence. So as a point of fact, that's one of the things I wanted to bring to your attention in relationship to the judicial notice, etc. In other words, you're telling them, you're not my trustee, nor are you my FOFR, that I am retaining all rights and all self-authority, etc., even though we are aware that you're hostile and that you're alien and that you're pretending to be government, knowing that you're not, and also upset because we figured it out that you are. This is where you have a lot of your operatives acting on behalf of the Circle Church and the Chancery, who have been making videos as of late criticizing, which all criticism is good if it's positive, but you'll see them misrepresenting what we have been presenting and attacking the judicial notice. But that's proof that they are anti-constitutional, because those judicial notice principles of constitutional law are stare decisis. It is the law of the land. And you can see why they are being so destructive in the name of helping the people, because the real deal is that they're upset that the people are waking up, because what it does, in fact, it interrupts with the smooth transfer of the bonding system, and this has affected their economic base, etc., and the stock market, as the people have not been aware that the stock is actually them. And this is also why members of the Roman Curia, through their Federal Reserve operations, have been propping up the stock market, because the nations will no longer want to trade with them, although the nations of the earth are burdened with the artificially constructed position of the Jesuit Federal Reserve note of private commercial paper, commonly known as fiat, being forced by force and by war and by covert operations, being what is known on the World Trade Platform as reserve currency. And the fact of the matter is that it has collapsed. Now, and so a lot of things that you see going on now is to cover up that fact. However, understanding that they also know that our people have been behind the times relative to fundamental civics, not just civics as a rule or discipline, but from fundamental civics. And by them keeping our people or miseducating our people through the John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, notice that name Gates, Federation operations of Inquisition Unum Sanctum, which you know as the General Education Board, which was set up in 1902, etc., with the missionary work of dumbing the people down. We need not go into that because you already know that. But that's for people who don't know, who may be listening, so you can do some research on your own so you can understand why your children are in trouble and understand why you've been in trouble, and understand why they can't read contracts, understand why and how they've been doing what you call dead pledges, mortgages, and gentrifying your communities. It's not about the complexion of your skin. It's that you don't know contract law and you have not been enforcing Constitution and treaty because you didn't know that's what the foundation of these problems are, etc. So the judicial notice kills their alleged authority in relationship to others, because remember, when they're doing business with other nations, whether they've been using, as they have used in the past, the marriage certificates, and in more recent years, the birth certificates to build their bonds on, the nations of the earth are not buying them anymore. So you need to understand the root of the political and economic confusion that's happening, taking place right now. And the other deal, they've been accelerating their theft of the people's estates, and they hide it behind the word inflation. Write that down and look it up later. We won't get into that. That's what inflation is. And they're accelerating it even more now, since you have people around the world, not just here at North America, who have been looking into the fundamental principles that we have been presenting for the last 35, 40 years, and are starting to take responsibility for their lives to the limit that they're able to. And of course, that's messing up the system. And so what they want the people to do, or how they want the people to respond, is to feel guilty for exercising rights, to treat anyone who speaks of constitutions, treaties, etc., to treat them as if they're violating the law, as opposed to people paying attention to the fact that these are actually organized criminals who have overthrown the Constitution for the United States in order to violate their obligations to the treaties that supersede that Constitution, and of course their obligations to the people. And instead of accepting the fact, which is taking place, that they're being exposed for the criminals that they are, the human traffickers that they are, the child sacrificing operations that they have operated, and the fact that they have actually been stealing people's estates, it can't be hidden anymore, because what's happening, these are the things that you're going to be looking for. Those of you who have investments in what you call 401k plans, pension plans, so-called medical retirement plans of any type whatsoever, they don't want you to recognize that they have robbed them all. And these are the people who you think are government. We're not talking about, see what they've done. This is what they've done. They have deceived the people into thinking that when they see, as an example, members of the gangs of New York systematically murder innocent women and men on the streets and accost them, and then charge them, who they attack, with battery and things like that. They don't want you to know that it is they who sent them out there to target the people. They want you to think that these people are operating outside, pardon me, authorization of themselves, when actually they send them out there. As an example, where you see members of the gangs of New York have been systematically, and they've upped the ante, particularly in the last few years, where they do what you call unum sanctum sacrifices on the street. This is where they'll snatch people out of cars and stuff like that and kill them or try to smother them. And it's kind of spoiled a little bit because people are starting to use cameras and take pictures of them. And the fact that they have cameras on their phones now, you'll see it taking place. You'll see it exposed more often, even though it happens more than what you see. But those purposes of those military operations serve the purpose of intimidating the people. But the point that it also is showing you is that these people are not your government. They are your enemies attacking the people of the land, the peaceful inhabitants of the land, and then calling the people criminal for even having any semblance of trying to exercise a right. So back to the point. The proclamations and judicial notice are to put the hybrid Europeans who have been faking as Americans for years, that they are not to claim in any instrumentality of having power of attorney over yourself or over your estate, etc. And this is also why you see the entrance or the preliminary preface statement on the judicial notice. Dr. Naila, do you have on your computer, say, can you read the preface on the judicial notice so that the people can, most of them are familiar with it anyway, but so they can build some questions around it, etc. Because remember, they have a lot of trolls that they have paid lately, and COINTELPRO operatives, including boasting, actually making videos where they boast about infiltrating all the Moorish movements to undermine them, and also finding operatives or cooperatives among them to create schism operations, etc. However, on the long term, the consciousness on the people is actually greater than their power to continue their schism operations. Can you read the preface on the judicial notice, please?
Starting from to all elected officials. So
yes.
Top. All right.
Read from the heading down.
Oh, all of the
judicial notice.
From judicial notice.
Yes.
Judicial notice and proclamation to all elected, all non-elected, and to all appointed United States Republic officials, public servants, and officers of trust, etc., doing business as of and for the federal, state, city, and municipal governments, including their personnel, their contractors, and their other associate corporate entities doing business at North America, and to all third-party interlopers or contractors, etc., concerning their fiduciary obligations, their official oaths, and their duties enumerated in the American Constitution, adopted for governance of the United States Republic, all binding treaties, the established law of the land, and all statutory and civil law codes of the land, etc. Know all men by these publications and precepts.
Now, yes. And then you can read the first three, stare decisis. Now, keep in mind that no man, no woman in government holds that office without an obligation by oath to support and to defend the Constitution for the United States. And when they make that oath, keep in mind that their obligation is superseded by their obligations to the treaties that were set forth before the adoption of that Constitution. So when you look at their obligations, you look at all treaties in force, etc., to which they're obligated. And the more you do a little bit of research on your own, you can understand why criminals would not only not acknowledge and exercise their obligations to the treaties in force and to the Constitution, because they are in fact feudal operatives, and they are actually enemies of the state, pretending that the people of the land are enemies of the state. As a matter of fact, what they've done is flip places and tried and have been practicing slandering people who have been dealing with Constitution and treaty principles as if the people are out of order or criminal, when in fact they are out of order and criminal. And the things that you're experiencing today in the political forums, etc., whereas we've been telling the people in general about these things for last 40 years or so, is that we don't have to tell you anymore. And one of the things that I've had in conversations with people in these last month or so is that I don't want to get in the position of saying I told you so, but I told you so. But I don't have to tell you so, because now they're showing you themselves. And this is where we've been telling people for the last couple of years and emphasizing it in this last year, where all masks are off. So the circumstances of the political trade windows of the world and the credit windows of the world being frozen up is causing them to be openly hostile to people, etc. And in that process, they're actually exposing themselves. However, the other thing about the judicial notice that you need to know, and that I'm going to inform you of for those who may not really grasp where I'm going with this, is that those instruments were actually to inspire you to think for yourselves and to come to a state of mind of growth, expansion, and analysis that was needed for the time. However, in principle, while those principles are universal and why they have no what you would call chronological or time span closure, etc., for their established principles, etc., it is also to prepare the people to think in such manners as we are going to have to grow and expand into other dimensional levels of thinking, because the world is moving on. And so we're not looking necessarily, how do you say, to establish or reestablish things as they were in the sense that it would appear. It is actually to give the people a clearer view of the breaches which have taken place, and also establish with the people their responsibilities to themselves and to their progeny to take responsibility of self-government back, as these criminals are de facto on all levels. And while it's been uncomfortable for people to study and to start to work to get their houses in order, it is important for you to recognize that you're not going to have too much of a choice to survive politically and economically, and in some ways physically, if you don't start getting your house in order. So the judicial notice is essentially on a metaphysical level as well as on a political level, firing the feudalists, also telling them that you know that they're feudalists, and also telling them that they have no right of power of attorney over you and your estate, and also that you're aware that you have right of your own estate, and also that your activities revolve around a reversion of estate, and that it is established law and not an option for them to critique or to counter, etc. And all counters made by them and all rebuttals made by them are actually acts of misprision, sedition, and treason. Know that for surety. Interjection, Doctor?
Not necessarily, but we do get a lot of calls from a lot of Moors who just exactly, which is probably what spurred this particular class.
Yes.
In response to so many Moors who call after having sent their paperwork to those 7 places, or sometimes even more, and they ask, did you receive it? They get back responses, no, well, we don't have it, or they get them, it comes back in the mail as returned to sender and so forth.
Now,
and they get up in arms, like,
yes, which
I need
means
somebody to help me.
That's not all right. So it's 2 things. Because this thing is bigger than, like, say, for instance, just like over the years, we have people at the House of Reawakening Minds. Over the years, we've had people come to the round tables, at my house and other places, come to New York. As we've done our classes in New York at the Moorish History School, civic class, etc. And then, of course, other venues. We've traveled around the country, at different colleges and different other venues, sharing with other people who are also active for the restoration of the estate, etc. And of course, in the process, you find, which is not an unknown factor, that almost every institution by program is infiltrated by operatives of the hybrid Europeans, which they boast of, if you get the point. However, what you recognize is that we have the unfortunate reality, whereas many people who become conscious don't really have years of background of studying both the anthropology, the epistemology, the cosmology, culture, jurisprudence as a rule, and which is also why the judicial notice is structured the way it's structured, because it's actually a teaching tool at the same time. Because in fact, in a rule of law, a notice doesn't even need to be that long. But knowing that many of the people have not had the what you would say the conditions where they would be in a class where some people would be studying civics, like many of the Moorish Americans had not had civic instruction since, like, say, maybe the early 20s, when Noble Ali set up the Moorish Temple of Science, which was a civic organization, etc. This is before the Moorish Science Temple of America in its, current iteration, political iteration. Then you all also know, for those of you who read the FBI papers, the infiltration problems that he's had since that time, since the mid 20s, etc. Then you had other organizations that had come about who were trying to establish or educational and erudition systems where the people could study constitutional enforcement principles, or what you call due process principles, and thus treaty principles that supersede that, because those principles of constitutional law actually come from fatwa or Moorish law in the first place, etc. And you find that the people are handicapped of not having the convenience of going to different classes. And many people have learned or heard about or had information shared with them, either through internet or papers that people have shared with them. And so they don't have a background. And so, but also what it indicates also is a lack of study. And so many people get paperwork, and because they've been programmed, because remember, this is part of programming that they've operating, because they're used to the hybrid Europeans sticking them with needles and sticking them with military pills, pharmaceutical military operations, and they operate from that mentality. All of our people have not shed that mentality yet, and then you also have the problem where our people have been subjugated by the John D. Rockefeller, Frederick T. Gates mental warfare operations of the General Education Board, and have difficulty dealing with etymological cross-reference research and finding true meanings of words, etc. Therefore, not recognizing structures in contract law, and of course, treaty and constitution principles. And so this is why you often see people get the paperwork and then they'll start asking questions, and that's immediate indication that, they don't have a civic background. But we also have the unfortunate conditions where having to try to get the people or bring the people to a certain level of consciousness, not having access to what you call educational and erudition institutions. And of course, as you already know, whenever we had any established institutions to really serve our people, that the hybrid Europeans would bomb them. As an example, what they did to MOVE, who had a structured education system for their own children, so they bombed them. What they did in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where our people had the largest and actually wealthiest bank on the land at that time, and they bombed them. So, you have unum sanctum operations that are constantly going on, and because they're warring against us. The unfortunate thing that you find is that many of our people are not aware that they're warring against us. They look at them as having skin complexion issues when actually they've been warring against us, warring upon us, which is a major reason why they spent so many decades disarming the people so that the people would have no defense. Now, back to the issue of constitutional principle, that is the pre-existing obligations that exist with these people who have been pretending to be government, And of course, they've been breaching that because, in fact, they've been contrary or operating contrary to those rules because they are de facto. So it is incumbent upon the people, nevertheless, to make those proclamations to the world, so that these people in the platforms of fraud that they have created and imposed upon both us and upon the world, that they have no validity in the trade platforms of the world, etc. So they cannot continue to build bonds on them. This is another reason why they want the people to think that they're going to get a benefit from these bonding systems, if you get the point, because people are not aware that the bonds are against them and on their backs, and is actually the source of their economic miseries, etc. So that's another reason for the proclamations, and that's another reason why, for those who really understand that these people are de facto, why they don't want those papers in their files. Why? Because it's evidence that can be used in international high courts of human trafficking. So they don't want that evidence in their possession, even though they're obligated by law to treaties that supersede even their obligation to the Constitution for the United States, which is why they disparagingly knock both treaty and Constitution principles, of which by principle of law they're obligated. However, it's on you, the people yourself, to declare right, even if the hybrid aliens don't want to acknowledge it. They cannot say that you consented to your own subversion, to your own subjugation, to connotative slavery, which is what they're saying to the world. Because every time they trick you to sign things like census and voting in their platform, they're using that on the world platform, saying that you sanctioned them against your state. Because we got to remember that they're de facto. And you got to be clear that they are de facto. So when you participate in the de facto platforms that they create in the name of legitimate government, they use it actually against you. And then when you don't cooperate, as they're causing injury on you, then they send out the first arm of the military octopus, known as the Fraternal Order of the Police, to destabilize the families, destabilize the communities, and severely attack anyone that deals with treaty enforcement and constitutional enforcement. And that is the misrepresentation and propaganda that you see going on these, what you call de facto attacks against any Moors or people of the land, not just here on the land at North America, but around the world, that stand on principles of treaties and constitution principles. Because in fact, they are operating absolutely opposite to that. Any other interjection, Dr. Nalia?
Well, I'm deep into what I told you today, my latest read that I've had sitting on the shelf for over a year.
Oh yeah, about a year and a half actually.
About a year and a half. Yeah. And decided to pick this up and really kind of get into it. And in the which is, and some of the listeners have probably heard of this. And I don't think it's a banned book, but or is it kind of banned?
Put it this way. What you're seeing today, particularly on this land,
right?
Anything, any information that helps people will be attacked.
Wow.
Now, the issue, what you want to recognize is, and this is where our work has to come in, to aid in bringing the people to a certain level of cognizance and competence, whereas they can reasonably determine for themselves and not be in a follower mentality, but be cognizant and competent enough to recognize that they're being attacked by these people who they thought were legitimate government. Now, from the position of the hybrid Europeans, their political problem right now, which is problematic with them right now, is trying to keep the people fooled in thinking that they're legitimate, and not figuring out that they're absolutely criminals, and that they've actually used people's taxes to actually hire private contractor, corporate entities, operatives to actually attack the people.
Right.
And this is what they don't know.
And see, but they have,
they have
I know one of my poems I wrote about their 1,000-year plan.
Yes.
So they have shorter term ones, but we can't plan for the next day, let alone for 1,000 years. But this book was written in 1998.
Yes.
And as I said, I credit Father Hannibal for turning me on to this book. I got it, and I'll be honest with you, because you see behind you, there's
we've been busy, and this ain't nothing. Look, they don't see these books or here, or in the room, or downstairs, or in the basement.
All the books there.
Yeah.
But this book called to me.
Yes.
And it's the book called Neotech. Some people
some people are familiar.
And in the very beginning of it, I'm talking about in the introductory
part
of it, they're talking about they're neo-techs and neo-cheaters.
Yes.
We want to be neo-techs. And this book, apparently, when I go through the 500 and some pages, I will be adept at a neo-tech. But this is what it says about neo-tech versus neo-cheaters.
Go ahead.
With neo-tech, a person can take away the power from those neo-cheaters who have drained that person for years or decades. That capturing of personal power through neo-tech is crucial for all major neo-cheaters. And this is what we're seeing today. And we've been seeing it.
Yes.
Today, extract money and power from the masses of unknowledgeable people. How? Through the subtly camouflaged usurpation and destruction of values created, built, or earned by others. In fact, those value destroyers use neo-cheating without fear of being caught, without suspicion, and they are successful to the extent that they use neo-cheating. Consider how many of the most successful politicians have for years destructively regulated and harmfully controlled the value producers. You said it's us. It's the values of us.
It's called birthright theft.
They have neo-cheated the public for unearned personal power.
Yes.
Their power ploys have created jungles of destructive regulations and inefficiencies. They hassle busy individuals, cripple creative scientists, and prevent private enterprise from fully developing its productive and technological capacities. That arrogated authority not only diminishes everyone's spirit, but diminishes everyone's standard of living, and even prevents the development of cures for scourges such as heart disease, cancer, and AIDS. I'm gonna stop right there. But I'm just saying, in 1998, through 32 years ago, or 22 years ago, this man wrote this book, which is 500 and some pages, and that's just that's in the intro. But he may as well have written it today. As I've gone through this, he may as well has written it today, and it is my understanding that they did some, no pun intended, trumped up charges and
to get him out of the way.
Him after writing this book, which is liberation.
Exactly.
This is a liberating tool for anyone, and it's easy to read and easy to understand.
Exactly.
Turns the light bulb on, and how many of us could be in another place?
Yes.
Just by it, and it's not even stuff we don't know. It becomes stuff that you forgot.
And then look at this way. This is from a political perspective, right? That is another statement of simply telling you the operations of colonial operations. He's telling you what the parasitism is.
He talks about the media and everything. We're being
because
bombarded.
it's all
entertainment.
It's all networked. As an example, where you see Abdullah talking about for years, or where he changed the hertz in language in music, right, to dumb the people down, also to cause what you call vibrational sickness. Truthfully, and by the people not knowing the culture, they don't know that vibration is part of more science, is also part of healing. Where sound and light have always been traditionally part of African culture for healing, etc. And so they've lost cognizance of ancient established principles. And this is also part of the vampirism. So again, while the world is waking up, the people here are waking up. They're a little, compared to the rest of the world, they're a little slow, indeed, because belief systems have been imposed upon our people for so many generations that they've actually stopped taking responsibility for divine reasoning, thinking that their so-called religious orders were a divine protection. In other words, they start believing things without examination. Whereas, and this is back to the point, if they, where you talked about how the people forgot, if they actually even went back to childhood, the basic inquisition or the basic inquisitiveness that a child has, if they even maintain that, most of them in thinking would start of liberating themselves a long time ago. And this is again why it was so important for the dark priesthood to burn books and to enforce expurgatorius and prohibitorum. That's vital in the politics of the United States. And as a matter of fact, you can see expurgatorius and prohibitorum blatantly, and this is back to what we're talking about, the proclamation, blatantly operating through the social medias. As soon as you start talking anything that really helps the people,
shadow ban.
They will shadow ban, they'll demonetize, they'll attack, they'll even send assassins out in the name of de facto warrants, etc., which is also what they did to a couple of sisters that had suits on them actually a few years back, and literally went in their houses and murdered them. Yes, they did. And by the people thinking that these people are actually legitimate government, they start thinking about, what did this woman do to cause them to shoot her and her child? What did she do? Type thing. That meant that's a training. Right. It never dawns on them that these people are mercenaries. And yet it's so blatant. Not unlike this recent attempted assassination of that brother they told to get out of the car recently, and they beat him down. As a matter of fact, you could see one of the so-called sheriff definitely actually put his hand on his nose trying to smother him, and the sister was taking pictures, and he moved his hand. They're going to kill him like they did George Floyd. And as a matter of fact, that's current. That was in this past week, and they beat the brother up. Oh yeah, but we know what it is. It's unum sanctum operations, but our people need to know that that's what it is. But the deal of it is they're showing their hand, all masks are off. The major thing is for the people to understand is that these people are not your government. They are contracting mercenaries to enforce unum sanctum operations, which the people know about. It's not racism, it's not prejudice, it is war. They're warring against the people. And they've used the people's own taxes to actually hire contractors to war on the people. That's really the truth. And people are truthfully, when you start examining some of the statements people make, they're actually in denial of that because they don't want to accept that these people are really warring against them. Because there's two things. If you pay attention to some of the statements that are made by some of the people when you start talking about constitutional principles and treaty principles, the way they respond to it as if you're introducing them to something that's going to hurt them indicates that they have become slaves to the corporate operators. The fact that they fear persons that they think or have been calling government is indicative of the fact that these people are warring on them. Since when does a so-called public servant that taxes you and then war against you become your master? And what point do you start denying that that's what the relationship is, which is really what's going on right now? But again, the proclamation in law, from a principle of law, is firing them and for publicly any claims that they have been making on the stock market or in international trade that they have jurisdictional power over you. It is a rebuttal and a reversion of a state. This is another reason why they're mad, because really, and people don't know this, it kills the bonds. People are looking for them to respond and say, oh, we've got your papers and stuff. And, we know that, we're obligated. They're not the organized criminals. What you need to understand is the instruments that they have created already on the stock market that actually is a foundation of their wealth that they do not convert back to the people. They give it to Wall Street because that's part of the unum sanctum operations. See, this is what it is. When the people go out there and work on their job, J-O-B, for private commercial paper, they're trained from childhood that they're getting paid money. They're not getting paid money. They're getting voucher transfers. These are licensed voucher transfers. And even people that talk about fiat often won't be honest with the people and tell them bluntly what it really is. The Federal Reserve notes are licensed, which is on itself conditional, voucher transfer instruments on debt. That's what they are. That's exactly what they are. Now, so which means the persons who receive them are goaded into thinking that they're building wealth when they're actually building debt. Now, because they get things for them, right? They're under the guise that they're gaining when actually they're going deeper in debt. And what you'll really pay attention to, they've trained the people in consumerism. But when you really analyze what the people have been consuming, for the most part, 80% of everything that people have been buying in the last 20 to 30 years are things that have no what you call legs or long life value. They become obsolete. Right? They become obsolete and they become problematic and they become essentially useless. So now you have what you call a discard platform, what you call recyclables, right? Hold on. Now, I want you to pay attention to what I said a little earlier. When the nations no longer buy U.S. Treasury bonds, those of you who are listening, I want you to pay attention to this because I've told you about this for a while. Do you notice, and I noticed this the other day when I was sweeping up outside and cleaning up, that the trash collectors, who are usually late, right? We're now taking both the recycle blue cans and the regular trash together, whereas before they used to send separate trucks. But I recognized what I was looking at. What my neighbor was saying, was making note of that, right? But I understood it because what has happened is this. I just want you all to notice this. This is relative to international trade. The Manchurians, who you generally know as Chinese, put a stop to the U.S. corporation and England, etc., sending their recycled trash to China, which they also made, other products with. And so the real deal is that the recycling industry that was 300 billion average a year came to a screeching halt. So that's why you see the trash is being mixed again now. So now, so that means that industry is now being affected. And so now you're dealing with both the shipping and the flights. So you have the trade windows of the world, which has froze up. And many of the containers that were coming from China were being sent back with all these plastic containers and stuff. And China is no longer accepting that. That's another part of what I've been telling you all for years, that they're going to stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds. So that is also part of the market operation. So start paying attention to the trash people taking both the recycles and the regular trash together. The other thing I want to make mention to you, the fiat currencies, which right, wrong, or indifferent includes digital, etc., are collapsing. So they're trying to cover up the fact that they robbed all of the retirement funds, all the pension funds, etc. And your major corporate city operations at North America, as an example, Philadelphia, Chicago, San Francisco, Kansas City, etc. These different political jurisdictions operating on the land. We're not talking about the land itself, and we're not talking about the people of the land. We're talking about the corporate operators and the operating on the land, etc. Have robbed the people to the degree that they cannot meet the liabilities attached to both retirement funds, pension plans, etc. And they don't want the people to really find out and figure out that the politicians themselves, under being members of the Roman Curia, have actually, they didn't break anything. The system wasn't broke. The system worked perfectly. The purpose was to rob the people. It's just that they're not in the optional position to continue to rob other nations, because the nations of the earth are no longer in this what you call fired up atmosphere of buying U.S. Treasury bonds, which we told you they were going to stop doing, and you have a feedback loop. And so the real deal is, this is another reason why they're pushing digital, because keep in mind, whereas fiat currency or fiat notes being fiat and being worthless to the degree that other nations have their treasuries predominantly covered with what you call the reserve currency, which is why they didn't do a lot of things sooner, etc. Why also the members of the Roman Curia want to go to digital so they could rob the people quicker than they did before. Because the real deal is the real money is silver and gold. And I want you to recognize this. For those, I'm not going to go into this. Read Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution for the United States. Whenever you're thinking about any of the so-called governors or mayors of the cities or city council or any of these people that have been telling you that what we've been telling you is a joke, or that is false, or it's going to get you in trouble, which they always say, it only gets you in trouble to the degree is that they attack anybody that has knowledge or who won't submit. Now, so you'll see that they cannot pay any debt or create anything but gold or silver coin for payment of debt. So these people were thinking that they were paying debt with the private commercial paper fiat, and the fact of the matter is they were going deeper and deeper in debt. So I just want to remind you of that. Go ahead.
I was listening to the David Wilcock, and took some screenshots. And one in particular, he talked about the alliance. In 2009, they had met, a number of nations had met. The Gulf Arabs were planning, along with China, Russia, Japan, and France, to end dollar dealings of oil, moving instead to a basket of currencies.
Called SDRs.
Right.
Yes.
So including, I guess, the Japanese yen, the Chinese yuan, the euro, gold, and a new unified currency planned for nations in the Gulf Cooperation Council, including Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, and Qatar. And this was in 2009. And what happened, 2008, they thought it was going to be over with, but then the feds pumped all of this stimulus.
They call it a quantitative easing. In other words, what they did,
out and bail it,
they created fraud on top of the fraud on top of fraud. And this is when you see, at that time, you see the accelerated wars they were having, the endless wars that they've been having. Also, and why they've been so adamantly against Donald Trump for trying to stop these endless wars operations. And that's their in-house fighting among themselves, etc. Because, and this is back to the fact that they're no longer buying U.S. Treasury bonds. We've been telling people for the last 10 years, you know, and again, we've been telling them, you know, while you're trying to survive, they're forcing you, but make sure that you get some silver mainly. Now, and keep this in mind, when the Moors are still in power, and this is before the hybrid Germans who have been trying to pretend to be us for years, etc., took over the Yetta, etc., and the trade routes, etc. that prior to their operations, that the silver was basically like 1 to 2 in relationship to gold.
To gold, yeah.
Now, and that's a fact. And the fact that the technology, even though we had the technology actually for millennia, as far as the modern world has learned some of the old alchemy tricks of the ancient Canaanite Moabites and have been able to extract silver a little easier, which is only why it came to the point of being 13-to-1 type thing. However, in the real world, it's leaning back towards that ancient principle. And the world knows this. What they don't want the common people to know this. This is another reason why I'm appreciating that you have been actually sharing with the people and trying to get the people to acquire silver while they can.
And that's mainly because I remember what you've been saying all these years, and I hadn't heeded it. And got a couple of pieces before this, and it was a little bit harder to get. Now it kind of comes to the house, but I'm saying it was echoing in my ear. Get your fiat out of the bank. Only have as much in there as you need to survive on a monthly basis. Because
we're under occupation, not because you're supporting that system.
Right.
Because realistically that they're warring on you. And so, how I like to say, it's sort of like recognizing when someone in government is turning an army on the people. You don't submit to them because you honor them. You submit to them because they're criminals. But you keep in because you know that they hurt women and children. They sacrifice children. So what do you think they think about you? And this is where people do not understand when they start saying, how can they, I can't believe that the members of the Federal Reserve been doing this fiat currency since 1913, and they converted all allodial titles and aboriginal titles to mortgages and deeds, fooling the people, blah, 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 blah. How many generations of sacrifice is going to take you to recognize that these people are criminals? That's the really interesting thing, Dr. Naila. Their track record tells you all you need to know. What are you going to do on your own, by your own volition? It's like saying, Dr. Naila, why do we need silver? The fact that they ask you that indicates part of the problem, and then they'll start calling the private commercial paper, even after all this exposure of knowledge, call it money. It's not money, never was. It's not going to be money. Now, this is the deal. For inflation, which they're going to get in spades before this year is out, and is really going to show up as 21 comes in. Some of your biggest investors operating on the land at North America, one of which many other investors and stock holders always use as what you call a focal point to make decisions.
Yeah, their barometer.
And his name is Warren Buffett. He's dumping all U.S. stocks. He's been doing it before they admitted it on the public. But we already know this, which is why this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get our people to spend less time on useless things, spend less energy on frivolous things, humble themselves, simplify their lives, and try to preserve what they have, which is also a target for the taking as we speak. Fact, this is the uncomfortable truth. The people of the land of North America for these next few years, minimally, are not going to be gaining anything, no matter what they do. Their greatest struggle will be trying to hold on to what they even have, which is already been hypothecated. You already know that most of them are not even aware what hypothecation even means. So you all write that down, hypothecation, because that's what is also in operation as we speak and has been operating, etc. The other thing that the criminals plan to do as you wake up is they're going to accelerate the theft of your estates under the guise of what you call inflation, while at the same time, in secret, amassing as much silver as they can in their personal coffers. And I guarantee you, not because I'm saying so, you're going to experience it for yourself, that while we've been telling you for the last 10 so years to get some silver, you'll be lucky if you can, at any price of the fiat, get this, because they're not even going to accept it. Less more having enough to acquire anyway. Now, the importance of this as a silver. Now, your gold, you'll be holding that more as a hedge type thing, or what you call sort of as an insurance issue. But the silver can be spent around the world. And even though you're not going to get what you call change in emergency, you can spend this around the world and at least feed your family for what is or may be available. Because like Noble Drew Ali said, and he warned the Moors, he said the Europeans are going to try to starve you out. So already understand that's it's not so much coming, it's already here. It's just that they're disguising it with directed energy weapons. So what you're going to see is strange fires in strategic places all over the place. And with the GMOs, you already know that that you're not going to be getting what you will call renewable grain available to the average person who has not been buying those things in this past years, because they've been taking that stuff off the market to make sure that you can't grow anything that's seeded by them and it reproduce for the next year. So you already know that the genocide operations of Executive Order 11490, Rex 84, has already been in operation since 1969. It's not new. It's 1969. So when you talk about neotech and 1998
yeah.
98 area, that's a person who knew about King Alfred. And of course, conscious Moors know. The problem that we really have is trying to get our own family members to take these things serious, because you can't save the world. That's number one. And number two, you can't, even with the evidence, convince people who don't deal with facts to understand that these people are not their government. And it's an unfortunate reality, but it's like this in real life, if you don't accept reality, nature does not necessarily stop things from happening just because you're not being realistic. The hybrid Europeans have a solid track record of genocide against all Aboriginal people. It's not racism, it's not prejudice, it's unum sanctum operations. The fact that the people don't want to accept that just because we've told them that's what it is, because it's exactly what it is. What it has allowed is them to entrench themselves.
A lot of people would probably disagree with you from the standpoint, especially when you say it's not racism, because we have been indoctrinated to believe.
And you're right about the indoctrination.
Yeah,
but continue.
Right, to believe that what we're going through is something called racism. There's the human race, I say, and the hybrid race. So figure out which one you are. It's not racism. I get it. It's something that was set in motion.
See, it's sort of like how it's like if someone's like if someone's been robbing. Like when you told you mentioned earlier, and a lot of people have been suffering this cyber theft. And cyber theft is because once you activate a phone, as an example, right? A cell phone is no longer yours.
Right.
Once you activate an account with any bank system, it's no longer yours.
That's true.
The members of the Roman Curia are already set up to systematically rob people's accounts and act like it's somebody else that got your credit number to one of your cards and is robbing your account, etc. And if you notice how, as an example, if on the de facto platforms, if you owe them 20 notes, you get responses from them right away.
Just like the bread.
Bread. Right away.
So three months in a row now, I noticed I got a charge for
and
the
if
same
you hadn't
amount.
brought it up,
right,
it wouldn't have been brought up.
And it says bread. And I'm thinking, bread?
Yeah, bread
what
means...
I paid bread for $128.40. And why?
It sure doesn't sound like a name, does it?
Right. And then I said, bread, money, that's the slang for so-called money.
Now,
maybe they're just taking my bread.
Now look at, yes, if it was physical bread, it would set alarms, because what bread costs $150?
$28.40 every month.
Yeah, which is a pattern.
Right.
But we're not even talking about patterns. We're talking about...
a lot of people don't, if you have a reasonable amount, say in your account, say like me, who may not, back in the day, I had to balance everything. I don't even carry a checkbook or anything. I don't balance anything because I never.
And they know that the average person ends up doing that.
So when you don't, you can overlook these subtleties where they're robbing you.
Which is they've been doing anyway.
Yeah.
Now let's look at this. It's no different. You know how it is. Like, for instance, like, like when they were doing certain phone programs where they call roaming or something like that, where people make outside calls and
then you pay, then you paid more.
Yes. All right. You notice how it never misses a beat, never misses a beat. And if you default in any area, you're immediately notified, or your stuff is turned off and things like that. But yet you notice that when you have counts for them, that people get robbed daily. And if you don't report it, they don't say nothing. Now, however, they have programs where they'll charge you finance, where they'll notify you once in a while if something looks suspicious type thing. Right. But you pay them for it. But if you didn't pay them for that, you wouldn't get
suspicious activity in your account.
And the other deal, like when you had the issue about certain packages being sold, they robbed your account for almost $2,000.
Right. They did.
And said that you bought something that you didn't buy.
That's right.
And then when they're supposed, hold on. The time span. Now,
a year.
Rand, in my mind, this is what ran in my mind. The reason why they're not doing what you would expect, this so-called investigation, the way they say they do, because it's an inside ring and your complaint caught them. So if they investigate, they open up a can of worms. So they ain't trying to get the package back. You understand what's really... This is the point that I'm making to you.
the audience may not know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but we know what we're talking about.
But we're just basically saying to pay attention to what you have, particularly if you still have finances in their banks, because there are really fishy, foul things going on.
Because they're robbing you. See, this whole idea, they still have the people spooked. They still have the people thinking that these anomalies are outside entities. Like they'll rob, like say, for instance, this is what they've been doing. By process, by rightful process, many of these branch bank entities should have collapsed a long time ago, right? So they've been robbing people's accounts, and they'll tell us, well, we had, after they get people's accounts and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. Right. You remember they already got everybody's accounts, right?
Right.
Who think that these accounts belong to them. And after a year or so, or sometimes 2 years, of robbing people on a massive scale, and somebody finds out about it and publishes it, and 9 times out of 10, when these things become public, is usually some person who has been robbed that does a video or makes it public, and then you'll see a bank entity come out and say, "Oh, we've discovered that such and such a bank was breached 2 years ago to the tune of something multi-millions of dollars, blah, blah, blah. And they've got so many millions of people's accounts numbers and stuff like that." You ever notice that that's the pattern?
Yeah.
All right. Because they don't want you to know that they did it. So somebody in Ukraine did it.
We'll never know who did it.
They had somebody in East Blitzelstan.
Another country.
Yes.
And they're robbing the accounts.
Yeah. And the Chinese did it. And the reason why your pension ain't there because the Russians interfered with your accounts. And the people keep falling for it. However, the reality of it is that all of those platforms are collapsing because the rest of the world's not buying their treasury. That's what they don't want you to pay attention to. And the reason they're tearing up all these cities under the guise of like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that is so that when all this stuff hits the fan, that they can blame the people for it. When the 90% of this criminality that's going on has absolutely nothing to do with the people whatsoever, but are actually operatives of the Roman Curia. All these so-called movements are infiltrated, and all the injuries and destruction is coming from people who you thought were your congressmen and senators who are really in a state of sedition. Now that's really the truth, and they've always been that.
And we didn't know it.
The people just in their hearts, the people, they don't want to accept it.
Let me tell you how our local so-called local government mirrored our so-called national federal so-called government. As I see it, for the last almost 4 years, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, the House and the Senate, have spent, who we allegedly elected to represent us, has spent the whole time from before this man was actually took the oath of office, trying to get him out of office, and have done absolutely nothing for the people.
It never had before.
But now it becomes more
apparent.
It's
now
it's more
aren't the mask off? Aren't the mask
the
off?
The mask are off. In our local government, we have a council, city council.
Yes.
We've had factions within the council. Most of them are melanated. Look like us. One faction against the other faction, and the council president in the middle of nobody. One person, had some law as a Turner.
So you have tokens.
So we've had to. They have literally spent the whole last 4 years fighting each other, getting up and done. And so the people now are faced, if you do choose to participate in the so-called electoral process, I'm trying to say to people, don't worry about whether they are Republican, they got a D or an R. Who are they? What have they done? What is their record? And just like Ice Cube said, don't give your so-called vote away. We have to get something in return.
Now, let's look at this.
We never asked for anything. We just accepted what we've been thrown. Like, here you go.
And respectfully, the fact that, someone with some celebrity like Ice Cube would even make that statement still must be examined, because this is back to the other point. The vote never damn counted. How many generations you gonna figure this out? Whether you voted or not, if you vote, throwing your vote away is not an issue.
Right.
Whether you voted or not, anyone in office was already set up to be in that office.
But to see them now with the mask off, to be able to see that these people don't represent anyone but themselves.
And they never did.
That they've been down in the DC swamp for all of these years and getting rich off of what we hear about foreign aid to foreign aid offshore accounts. Now you can see.
What is foreign aid? Now let's look at this.
I call them offshore accounts.
No, let's look. That's what they are and what they always was. Yeah. Now, and this is back to fundamental civics as an example, right? And this is also back to the proclamations, because they're claiming to represent you and then using that foundation as the political sovereign power that they've been exercising in trade with other. This is what people need to understand. However, show, and I challenge anyone, including the trolls that come on these different venues, to show in law, in treaty, in constitution, where any of these so-called congressmen, senators, or representatives were authorized to tax the people of this land to the point of billions of energy a year and send it to other nation states.
Yeah.
No, the claimed authority is the evidence of the fraud. It's just that it's run out, and these people still have not caught on that these people are their enemies.
Well, why would funds be sent to another nation when your own so-called people that you represent there people are still homeless and jobless and without health care and without representation. All of these things that are that is lacking right here.
What is the intelligent response or conjunctive statement to that
Can I say
analysis?
There's a bunch of BS.
No, this is what it is. It is obvious that they never represented you, that they're robbing you, the very fact that they're doing it, not why. What you see in Los Angeles, in Oregon, in Seattle, in Philadelphia, in Chicago, with people in tents, was purposeful. The fact that these people won't accept that these people in government is their enemies, the problem.
And government controlling the mental.
That they're under attack. This is back to the proclamation. Whereas the votes that these people have been, propagating never counted anyway. What does count in law is that judicial notice and proclamation, because it comes from you, from your own venue, and it tells the world that you do not consent. That's what it is, a notice of non-consent.
I like that. And
it is a notice of non-consent.
Yeah, and
not a request.
That's right. And it says that we're publicly declaring that all rights I was born with, I reserve, reclaim, and preserve, which are unalienable rights.
Exactly. And
should we be putting that on
everything? See, now let's go back. Why do we do this for people out there that doesn't have a background? Because we need to push them ahead. Because remember, these arguments and these principles of reversion of a state are not being taught in the public forums. And logically, you, I, and others who care about the people, we don't have the options or the liberties or the venues by which these people, like they go to church, mosque, synagogue, temple, they don't have venues where they can get this kind of information, because they don't know that half of these institutions are in cahoots with the Federal Reserve, whether they got 501c3s or any other skull and bones agreements. They for the most part, knowingly and unknowingly, are compromised against the interests of the people. So these instrumentalities of the judicial notice create a problem for the international trade venues. It's sort of like the unfortunate reality is that we have to take some pain to liberate ourselves. Our people are looking for a benefit in a system that is actually bleeding them, and they're reluctant to do so, but they want the liberation. It doesn't go together. You can't serve two masters. It's an unfortunate reality, and you can say it like that, and and I know that the average person will start giving their opinion without examining the reality of the cause and effect of what's actually going on. Meaning that they'll look at, just like we were saying earlier, people disagreeing. They can disagree or not. It matters not. When you're talking facts, an established record, it's not an issue of agreement. It's a matter of what it is. Now, you can accept it or reject it, but it doesn't change it. This is the problem that we have, is that people have been goaded into thinking or taking up positions of whether they agree or not, or whether they believe or not understanding that's not the reality. The reality of it is that these people are actually their enemy. It's not because I said so. I'm just observing and just telling the truth. I do research. I don't deal with beliefs. And you'd be surprised how many people get offended when you don't deal with beliefs and you deal with research and facts and establish what is called stare decisis, thinking that you're against their divinity, their perception of divinity, etc. And it's not unlike, the harmonic statement made in the Bible where it says, study all things and keep that which is good. That's the position that I take. when you study things, you think that you take that which is true, which is good, and the rest of it, discard it. And the fact that people have not taken that principle as a rule of guiding their lives is part of why we're in trouble. And you'd be surprised how the people will take that position as actually being anti-spiritual, anti-God, anti-religious. But yet it is in their books that they claim to be a party to.
Well, I like the fact that you said it's not the paperwork that makes you.
It isn't.
It's you. It's you that makes the paperwork.
Exactly. The paperwork is there to establish, and they can actually be expanded, right? But the paperwork is structured in such a way that can be presented to a being that's not familiar, and get them in a state of mind of familiarity to how they should be thinking, which is really what they're designed for, and then give them support systems, reference systems where they can see that this is not, say, an idea being presented to them, but that this is the established jurisdictional facts that have been held back from you, which is why your other problems that you've been calling racism have allowed to flourish. Why you've been injured? Because these things have not been enforced. You need to understand that relationship. And a lot of people don't understand that the judicial notice is a reversionary statement. It's a notice of reversionary claim. It's not a request at all. So what in the nature, this is what it's doing. It's presenting to people who are frauds, who know themselves to be frauds, but who also know that the masses at large don't know that they're fraud. So you're against this force. Then they control the venues of the media to lock you out at every turn. And this is also why they would do personal attacks rather than factual attacks, if you get the point. Knowing that the people are been trained in bias, not in knowledge. See, so a person who's been trained in belief systems does not do what you call intellectual discernment by virtue of fact or epistemology or etymology. They deal with the emotions of belief, how they feel, or what someone told them without examination. They deal with what is known commonly as blind faith. Such persons logically in law are held as state wards. And so when you're looking to deal with solutions from a person in that state of mind, you're going to have great difficulties for yourself and for themselves. And this is again why the proclamation is expanded, when actually a proclaimed statement need only be a paragraph for those who are in honor. But when you have people that are not in honor, and then people who have been controlled by such persons, if you understand, you have to kind of, show them some of the cards that are being played. So that, again, is the judicial notice. So the notice is putting people on notice, but it's also putting you on notice.
Basically, it's the process that you need to go through to immerse yourself in the reality of who you are.
Exactly. And what the obligations of treaties and constitutions, which are the supreme law of the land, why it's there. And you also discover that in people starting to relate to them and even asking questions after, which they should do, but you recognize the nature of some of the questions, that the injury, because they don't recognize it, because it's not with them, because they're not cognate of what these papers present to the world.
Here's a question that's popped up like several times. Moorish Media is asking to ask you about the December 21st and the solar flares.
Well, December 21st, you can look at it this way. From an astrological position, cosmological position, you're dealing with the entry of the winter solstice.
So apparently,
or what they would call in religious order the death of Jesus, or the death of the sun.
Apparently, this particular solstice is coming up. It's being touted as something that we are to expect solar flares that may have some, maybe devastating, if you will, a catastrophic
part
effect.
of this is, and remember, and you got it now. For those who have a question about it, I would suggest you go to the culture, to the Earth culture, and do some astrological research, cosmological research, and answer it yourself, because you need to know, because that is your science. That's number one. And number two, whenever you're looking at any analysis from what you call an African perspective, remember they're always layered. They always have multiple meanings. So you must also look at, are they projecting to you a distraction or fear, knowing that the average person doesn't know that. Even when you look at those dates, always pay attention to dates and look at the cosmological and geometrical positionings that they take, the numerical positionings that they take. And knowing that our people have been steeped in belief systems distinguished from cosmological knowledge, that most of the people who have been steeped in belief systems immediately go into fear. You know, oh, what's going to happen?
Right.
Oh, an asteroid is going to hit in West Virginia.
Yeah, they've been talking about asteroid too.
Yeah. In other words, like this, but what does it do? It takes your mind off of what? Corrupt rulers. 90% of the injury that's coming from you is going to come from you from some man or woman with 2 legs, 2 arms, claiming to have authority over your personality, your person, your estate, your economics, or is robbing you. Look at the falling star and shit. You know, and
look at the peanut butter sandwich full of
and the devil's behind the mountain. We'll see where the dark shade is over there. And then you got your hand in your pocket, you know, it'll punch you in the back of the head. Hey, what's a ghost? You know.
What they're trying to do is to influence the collective consciousness, because they know about, you know, we talk about, you know, that field of, you know what I mean, where everything is in an energetic field of consciousness. When we all start to think,
if
of the
you
same thing,
slow down,
yeah,
you know how, like when Drew Ali always told the Moors, listen to that still voice. Why? What it's really telling you is that nature herself, Mother Nature herself, will start healing your wiring if you're not distracted, if you're not full of fear, if you start using your divine mind.
If you have your heart chakra activated.
Isn't that called sincerity and honor?
Absolutely.
If you are in honor, nature aids you. See, this is the deal. We've gotten so disharmonic with nature, with the nature of self, and with the nature of nature herself, that we have made ourselves default subject to dogmata, priesthood, and the dark operations of inquisitionists, really, which is what's really been going on. And logically, they don't want the people to recognize that the priesthood has done this. That's number one. They don't want people to recognize that people who've been claiming to be government did this to you. Number two, that poverty is a political operation, not a nature operation, not a nature anomaly. The earth does not produce any beings that she can't feed. That's number one. Number two, all the living beings of humanity on the planet Earth, when they're telling you overpopulation, what they're telling you is that you're too big for us to control. All of them can fit in the area that you call Rhode Island and have space between you.
You're talking about the one.
The entire population of humanity on planet Earth can fit in the area of what is known as the territorial state of Rhode Island, which is the smallest.
No, we're the smallest.
I
think they're the second, right? They're smaller as us?
Yeah, Rhode Island.
Okay.
In other words, the whole point, everybody on the planet can fit in that area and have space between them. So when they told you,
so the lie about all the
it's a lie.
8 billion people on the planet is we see the crowded streets.
It's to justify their unum sanctum culling operations, which has always been going on. The culling operations is the unum sanctum operations by the priesthood to keep humanity at a certain number where they can control them. So they kill off numbers of them through wars and dealing with the males, because remember, women outnumber males. Females by nature outnumber males, right? So, and then they kill off a number of the children every year so that they don't grow up, and then they use them as product and also for food. And they don't want the people to ever figure that out, although it's coming out little by little. That's a fact. So they'll, if they're not talking about a virus, they're talking about an epidemic, they're talking about recession, they'll talk about famine, and all of it is artificially introduced, which is really what they don't want the people to figure out. However, from a divine perspective, our metaphysical divine responsibility to nature, to that which is divine, the proclamation and judicial notice is saying to the world, for the record, I do not consent. Do you expect the criminal to respond to that and say, oh, I got your message. Oh, I'm stop stealing your peanut butter sandwiches and stuff. Oh, I'm going to tell you that the account that you opened at the bank never was yours, that it was ours, and that it's an unsecured loan, and that we intend to bail in because it's structured to do so. And we tricked you into contributing to this retirement fund that we from the beginning were stealing and never intended for you to actually retire. And then when it got to numbers that you were retiring, that we already had planned to introduce viruses and stuff and other methods of killing you off. And that's all of these other things that you keep thinking is happening in nature. Then the Russians, the Chinese did it. And you're looking over there. And this the other thing. Let's look. Let me make this one statement. Intelligence, child level intelligence. The wards, the persons held to wardship on the land at North America were told that a virus jumped from over 6,000 miles away from China and jumped across the oceans and really messed up the economy and everything over here. And so if you stand 6 feet apart, you'll be protected. Now, if a virus jumped 6,000 miles, I don't think 6 feet can help you. Just something put out there. Just child thinking, like duh.
A lot of things don't add up.
It doesn't need to add up for people who are believers. See, because remember, when you're dealing with people that won't deal with reality, that won't deal with facts, that won't accept that 2 and 2 is 4 anywhere on the planet, you can tell them anything, which is what our problem is, which is, again, why the proclamation papers are seven pages, when it only needs a small statement. I do not consent, and I am not the stock surety for members of the Roman Curia who own the foreign alien corporation known as United States Corporation Company doing human trafficking, which is all you need to say. But it ain't limited to that, because these people still think it's a country. You see the problem? So you got to go. And then they say, oh, that's your opinion. So now you got to give them stare decisis. That's why the stare decisis is there. And they don't understand that the operatives operate from this perspective. And this is a fact. Any right you do not claim, they hold it in legal process that you've abandoned that right, and they claim that right and bond it. All their bonds are based on theft of the people's rights. They are soul stealers. They steal light, including their practices of blocking out the sun.
Do you remember when Bush, was it Bush or something, or one of those presidents talked about 1,000 points of light.
Oh yeah,
They were making a reference to.
you're talking on multiple levels. You know, and people talk about that too, and still, and you what you recognize is that people look for the subtleties of the contradictions and don't look deeper. That they're telling you what they're doing to you, because they recognize that divine law and what you call ens legis operations are two different platforms, and that, you know, whereas you can fool men and you can fool women, you can fool children, and you can fool donkeys and rabbits, but you can't fool Mother Nature.
Yeah, and you can't.
This is the reason why.
Either.
Yes, this is the reason why, even though they've held the people back and hidden old technologies that's really, according to what we have now, actually supremely advanced. We're not talking about new technologies. We're talking about ancient technologies that are extremely and presently advanced and are in present use by persons that these people thought was their government, who's actually been, this is basic. Let me put this bluntly. These people you've been calling your congressmen and your senators and thinking that you're your representatives have been studying ancient Africa, ancient Egypt, Egypta, ancient Hittites, Canaanites, etc., Lemuria, etc., and to what they could gather, and recognizing how far behind the 8 curve or how the curve of real human culture that they are, has been preserving this knowledge for themselves, but using it to the negative. And they think that they have, their position is that they have robbed the descendants of the great architects of Earth culture to the degree that now they can take over the planet. Now they need to kill you off. That's what their politics are. That's the truth. And again, you're speaking from both from the spirit plane and from the civic organizational structure plane of jurisprudence that I do not consent. And that, again, is the judicial notice. You're not looking for a reply. You're not requesting anything. You're making a declarative statement. That's what you're doing.
I know some people are very concerned, particularly, I think, if they're closer to what we would call that retirement age, you know, that they, you know, a lot of things are probably.
They should be concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people concerned with, you know, well, you know, I've been paying, people say my Social Security or whatever.
So that my is really problematic. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah. My Social Security and whatever. The younger generation, it's almost a foregone conclusion that there's not going to be a Social Security system, at least not as we know it, for them. They kind of know that they are being used. They're being, like, they got bigger straws in their necks than they do for the rest of us. So, but the people that are like just about there, they're like, you know, okay, I hear this stuff about nationality and birthright, but I don't want to lose what it is that I have.
I don't want to lose.
They may have a 401k. What is your advice?
This is my advice. This is my advice.
Okay.
And this is really the truth.
That's what we want.
This is the truth.
The whole truth, nothing but.
Their imagination is like that picture I've been looking at, a beautiful picture. It says imagination. That they ever had faith in it was in their imagination. That they have faith in it at all now. And they're worried about it, which they should be. What they should be worried about is this. Remember what we said quite a few years, in these last few years, everybody, whatever God, version of God that they have, they need to call them?
Yes.
This is the grand opportunity for all who've been making God claims on what level, that's not a criticism, to go ahead and make your contacts now, ahead of time, you know, as the chaos comes, you know, because the fire is burning all over the daggone place, because you're going to need them, because it's sort of like, it is, you know, like the wishful thinking, people start talking about retirement, when the deal of it is, it's dead. But it was dead from design. They're in denial It's still this psychology that they're in denial that it was part of the plan from the beginning. They just keep thinking that these people are their government, their mother, not their occupier. They keep their benefactor, not their parasite. Their fellow citizen, not a colonist, and their descendants who have sucked your energy and the carcass, and you're sensing that they're getting ready to drop the carcass from the web, and you're saying, I'm worried about whether they're going to drop it. Do you not recognize that you're a carcass already? You know, how many of you, as an example, ever examined the Federal Reserve note and noticed that in the corners of the dollar bill, you see a web as part of the graphic design? Do you know why it's a web?
Why?
It's two things: black widow spider, and two, what a web represents. You were caught, you were played. All accounts that are in a name that sounds like yours is not yours, never was. All so-called retirement plans that ever existed for one purpose, and that is to promote blind faith in a dead system that was dead from its inception. And what they have been doing, how all of the systems have operated, they've operated from this perspective. Rob someone else. This is why they have armies, or what you call bases, in 189 countries. They've been robbing people around the world, going to and fro the earth, devouring nations, stealing their resources, and then buying faith from people who would support them and help them in these wars. And then you have what was inevitable and what is the fact, and that's called an operation of musical chairs. And the musical chairs has accelerated in this day and time, and that's what people are feeling. And so everyone's saying, but, you know, I'm going to lose my retirement if I declare my nationality and stuff. And the real deal of it is, it's already lost. The real deal is they don't know what to think. See, because all of the things that they built their faith in have already failed them. And people are in a state of denial and also in a state of inquisitiveness of where do we go from here? And what they're asking is, what do you suggest I do now? What I've been suggesting you do for the last 25, 30 years, prepare yourselves for this stuff. And if you hadn't done anything, what are you asking me for? Because every man, every woman, every child must confess their own. We've been asking you to confess your own. Those proclamation papers are a confession of your own. Did you know that? Any reversion of a state is a confession of your own. Any waiver of confession of your own is an abandonment of your own. Did you know that? If you didn't, now you do. Because we've been telling you forever and forever. So it's sort of like when you tell people to use the energy that's given to them divinely, to use their divine reasoning, and they choose not to because they're busy at the bar, or they're busy believing, or they're busy marching and praying, and then a storm comes and they say, what do you suggest we do with the storms blowing on the roof? The storm is blowing on the roof. Well, it blew out the back windows. What do you suggest to stop the wind? We accept that you find the lowest position that you can, maybe in the basement, and go there because the storm is on. Information is given to people to act on, but it is up to them to act on it or not to. It's called free will, isn't it? It's called choice, isn't it? If you give people reference and you give them support information and suggest to them, because you can't tell people what to do, suggest to them to take certain positions and they choose to not take such positions because they don't believe in those positions or they don't have faith in those positions, They have faith in the occupiers because the occupiers started some program, told them they're going to give them a sandwich. And then they open up the lunchbox that they've been carrying half their life that's really making their arms tired and everything. And then they open up the box and they notice there's nothing in there. And they say, what do you suggest that we do with this empty box? Why are you asking me? It's your box. You accepted it. In other words, it's like people keep wanting to make pacts with Romans, and then keep acting like the Romans have no track record of never being honorable, that they have a track record of never honoring law, that they even say in their own dissertations, one way or another, that they are the lawless ones. So when you're talking law and justice, they are in opposition. They keep showing it over and over again. When you're talking about justice, they've been showing you over and over again, they are opposed to justice. When you talk about fairness, they show you over and over again, they're opposed to fairness. When you talk about humane operations and executions, they show you over and over again they are in opposition. How many generations are you going to voluntarily sacrifice to them when they've showed you who they are? They've done everything but tell you bluntly, look, we're kicking your ass. Some of them now tell you, yeah, we're devils. What else you want to know? Yeah, we don't observe law. What else you want to know? What you going to do about it? That's what they're saying. So they're saying sort of like that the hybrid European said in Newark a couple of years ago. Our people are always talking about white people don't like them. They don't like black people. And that hybrid European said, you need to talk about your gods that clearly don't like you, that you're paying for generations that never rescued you and walked away. And nothing more bluntly truth could be said, and a few of the people were calling them racist.
Here's a question. Is the QAnon movement just trying to co-opt our awakening?
It's two things. As we said years ago, a lot of the hybrid Europeans are telling the truth because they've lost their authority over the estate that they stole from us. In other words, they've been thrown under the bus. So you'll find that most of the people that call QAnon are actually middle class. And some of people who are on the lower levels of what they would call the made man platform of the elite. But for the most part, are middle class Europeans that are telling the truth because they've lost their estate. They didn't expect to get thrown under the bus.
But they're not doing it to restore our lost estate.
No, because they tell you the truth, all of it.
Yeah, they're not doing it.
They tell you the truth. As an example, for those of you who also have points of reference, and we won't get into this because it's not the subject matter, that when Pope Francis did the motu proprio in 2013, and also when he wrote that civil orders letter direct to Barack H. Obama, and literally told the people the politics. How many people even gravitated to analyze that and even share with their family members? So they can't even say that they weren't told. But was that us telling us? No. Pope was backing up what we've been telling people for 40 years.
Although a lot of those things,
and they're gonna make excuses, and they start that kind of stuff.
No, I'm saying that a lot of those things, though Barack Obama was told these things in that letter, a lot of those things still have not collapsed. A lot of those, it's seemingly
they did not. Now, what did he say? Even now, this goes back to the motu proprio. So the motu proprio.
This is what you wanted to hear.
so the motu proprio, where the Pope said that they collectively were ceasing doctrine of discovery policy operations now, which is one of the political tools that's been operating on planet Midgard. He said it. That's what the motu proprio 2013. So all Asiatics who pretended they didn't understand what Noble Drew Ali was talking about, or like he was talking about some religious belief type thing, when he was actually talking about the theft of your estate etc., and the issue of restoration of a state, and they keep pretending that this needs a bunch of analysis. Doesn't need analysis. It needs honest people to look at things for what they really are. So what did Pope Francis do? So when you're talking about the letter civil orders to Barack H. Obama, what he's talking about is them breaching their obligations to even the Roman Curial order. Which means what? They got so used to their criminality, they telling them, no, we ain't stopping. So now in between time, you had what? As an example, and it's not the only example, it's only what's made public. BRICS, what you know as BRICS.
Right.
Got together, and although individually...
Brexit, you mean Brexit?
Brexit, no, BRICS.
Oh,
that's,
okay.
that's Brazil.
Oh, Brazil.
Russia, India, China, Korea, etc., got together, and this is again with the reestablishment of the Silk Road. Before colonial operations, you need to know timelines. Before the Napoleonic Wars, etc., and before the hybrids took over the trade routes of the Moors, etc., that they were reestablishing that. And then since then, you've been seeing Britain, the hybrid British, and the U.S. corporation operatives attacking China on every angle, knowing that that's really what's taking place. Why? Because if they don't buy the treasury bonds, they can't keep up the farce. And while we here, our people here, have been intimidated, pretending that they don't serve nobody but Jesus, God, Allah, and Yahweh, the real deal is they have been exposed because that's who they fear. And even when you can give them facts, what do you get? What is the average response that you get, Dr. Nayola? Let's be honest. Statements of fear. What's going to happen to them? They're not going to give me my retirement. They're going to fire me if I tell the truth. Just like you see some celebrities, as soon as they start telling the truth, they'll shut them down, fire them off TV, fire them off cable and everything else for telling the truth. And it happened to quite a few people, and it's becoming. But the issue is that they're pulling off their mask, meaning that they ain't faking it. They ain't trying to do the programs. They're just coming out and abusing the people. And what you going to do about it? Now, what they're really telling you is prove you God. It's sort of like what they told Prince when he was trying to get control of his music. Oh, so now you're starting to study contract law. Oh, and you got on TV and told the people that George Washington was the 9th president. Who you been talking to? So he knew that Prince was awakened, right? And they know his position. He's going to start influencing people. They say, well, let's look at this like this. You can't make no more records even using your name, Prince, because we got contracts on it. And if you haven't been studying contract law, tough cookies, dare you to use it. And then as soon as he got control, all of a sudden he had a drug overdose.
Yeah.
Oh, same thing. Oh, Whitney started getting control of her music. She drowns. Then after all the hoopla, the misrepresentation, and the inheritances were being, hypothecated, and her daughter started figuring it out, and she started doing a little bit investigation. So they drowned her in the tub too, and then got rid of her boyfriend, said that he did it,
and then got
rid of him.
Got rid of him.
These are all messages. Now, Sam Cooke, right?
Yeah, he was.
As soon as he started getting conscious, start controlling his music, and also helping others and in the Nation of Islam,
yes,
etc. All of a sudden, he was tortured and killed, and even fingernails pulled out. And they said that he was getting in some kind of argument with some small woman at a hotel who had shot him. Yeah, and he was fractured face bones and everything, broken hands. He was tortured. Otis Redding starting to get control of his music, so his plane goes down.
And the Barcades.
Who else? Let me see. We ain't gonna tell you about Mike, though. There's some things there that people gonna find out later, but nevertheless, same thing with him. And our people haven't paid attention to any of that. Point that I'm making is that the hybrids do not want the people to figure out, and is being exposed, that number one, they are hybrids, and some of them ain't human, and that these people are under occupation. They're not suffering racism. That's a cover-up argument. That's why they never mention Carlos Linnaeus and the phenotype operations, and Frederick Blumenbach, etc. And the operations and all this stuff started in the 1700s with them what? During the time of the Napoleonic Wars, etc. And they were reconstructing society. And so people are
shooting the noses off of statues.
Yes, yes, yes. Again, and even learning and not wanting people to know that pyramids in Hikupta in Egypt are 3 times older than what they've been telling the people, and then some. And also that we've got pyramid structures all over the Western Hemisphere, more numerous than they are on the other side, and some of them older. So and also the technologies of the ancient world, that are some of which they've figured out a little bit, that are being used currently. And basically this is back to really what's going on right now. So all these systems of so-called security that they built these people up with to make them dedicate their lives to work their life and think that they're going to retire, they never intended for them to retire. They intended to get them to a point and then kill them off.
Even right now.
No, it's what's going on. That was always the plan.
No, Jeremy L. Malik Bey says, could you explain in the best syntax, what will this collapse look like to the average person when it really does?
This is what it'll look like. It will look like basically this, what we've been telling people. Whatever your concept of gods that you've been claiming, anyone, me, you, anyone else, no one's exempt. This is your grand opportunity to prove it. Whatever intelligence that you have, divine or otherwise, here's your opportunity to prove it. Those of you who are jumpers who claimed you've been jumpers, etc., and talking about your spiritual and your psychic and everything, stop now, prove it. Because guess what? You're going to need it, and a bag of chips in the soda pop.
So I'm assuming he is asking from a standpoint, will there be mass hysteria? Will there be looting?
The rioting and stuff is a cover up for what's going to be happening. It's already going on. It's already,
so they're getting
it's already begun.
Okay.
Intelligence.
So people need to bear
this
arms
is a
to
suggestion.
protect their property. And
it ain't going to help you. Not that it ain't going to help you. Let's be real. Let's be real. Let's be real, Dr. Naila. Number one, remember when they were so-called rioting in Baltimore area after they murdered their brother, Freddie Gray?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There was another sacrifice. Do you notice how people didn't pay attention how they dispersed the crowds? They don't even know that they were using sound wave and microwave technology.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, hold on. When I was young, and they were training me without telling me, the so-called special forces and stuff like that, right? Which is why when I got in fights when I was in the service, I always got Article 29s. I never went to the break. I used to use a weapon that shoot through trees. Like you hide behind a tree and think that you're safe. Well, you're not. Now that's then. And at that time I was like 18 or 19. people have no idea that the weapons that have been afforded to the people are obsolete, that the weapons that they don't know about, they don't have a chance. That's not to discourage people from defending themselves. I'm telling you what I already know personally, not what I don't know that I'm admitting that I don't know. I'm telling you what I know. I was 18 because I was expert with weapons. I had a weapon, and it's not including the M79, looked like a short shotgun. Not a shell bullet that looked like that. And you didn't shoot it like this, you shot it like this. And take a tank out. My question and statement to you, what do you think you're going to do with an AR-15 or M16, 15, 16, 17, whatever? They have heat-seeking bullets. They have some that split, some that curve, that the public never gets. Do you think that you're going to go to the person who manufactures these weapons and he's going to give you weapons to compete with him? I mean, use your intelligence. Now, we're not talking about immediate defense in your everyday affairs. You have a right to that. But if you think for 1 minute that you got any kind of weapons that's going to compete with the hybrid operatives, unless some of you, because I'm not saying that some of you aren't jumpers, because I know some of you are. But I also know that most of you are not. And so I also know that most of you can't step over anyway. So why would we turn around and give or imply to our people who we're trying to help to take a position when we know they can't win? My position with you is this. You say you're spiritual, prove it. You say you're dimensional, no problem. Prove it, because that's where your weaponry is. Your weaponry is in the higher state of mind. You're dealing with forces and powers that most of these people have no comprehension of what's against them. However, I will say this with a surety. Sincerity, key. Unselfishness, key. Honorable intentions and will. I could probably go further, but I'm staying safe. Mm-hmm. Those are tools. If you'll take them and use them, there's other defenses that will come to you.
If you meditate, it will start to.
Because guess what? No, because if you're there, you don't need to meditate because it is who you are. It's almost like,
I mean, if it's something that they're not doing.
I'm not really disagreeing with what you're saying right now. It's a cognizance that I'm really trying to respond to. But
there's some. I know you. I kind of feel what you're going to say, but there are some people who just have not been.
I know that. That's why I don't say certain things.
They've been, caught up in religious dogma and all of these things. They've been
which
caught
is
up in
a dead weight.
Right. They've been caught up in external salvation, and that they somehow were going to be saved from everything, caught up, taken out away, whatever.
They will be sacrificed. Let's cut to the chase. They will be sacrificed. Right. Let's cut. However, what
because I always say,
I try not to go there.
The rapture will be a capture.
Because this is the real deal. People don't know the power that they have.
They individually.
Yeah. Now, however, it's sort of like trying to get people to look at things, in with an eye of honor, with an eye of unselfishness, with an eye of good intent. But half of them don't believe that that's armor. And again, that's what I have to say about that. And if I try to press it further than that, I will be getting into a dishonest position.
I Appendix G. I just opened the book, page 313, Neotech. Those who live by producing values, no matter how much false power neo-cheaters gain by attacking the producer and usurping values, they never can escape a fact they all want to deny. Honest, productive effort is the act of living. You just said that.
Because it really is.
Thus, productive effort is the only source of genuine power, honest prosperity, and abiding happiness.
Yes. And you can't, if people see, and this is Dr. Naila, it's sort of like if people kind of, and I don't, I'm not trying to judge. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. But if people haven't arrived to that, and if you can't get them to trust themselves or to look within and find that honestly, not with trying to gain some retirement fund, trying to gain some material thing, just be honestly real. That is the armor. But guess what? How many people don't believe that? So the sacrifice will be a willing sacrifice. Whosoever will, let them come. Whosoever will, let them hear. Whosoever will, let them be. But people will still take that as some kind of spooky statement. Do you understand? And I don't really want to go there.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying to you? I will say, take responsibility. Be honorable. Want for others what you want for yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And severely and sincerely, don't be selfish. Nature comes to your aid. And if you don't believe that, I have nothing more to say.
Comments, questions. Let me see. All right. I'm looking to see what. I do not believe the honorable judges will bear looking and trust. Yeah, you're right. How do we operate, Trey Bay? How do we operate our professional businesses lawfully after making the proclamation and give notice without the 14th Amendment?
Without. Now, that's number one. Well, the without is saying, which is proper, you can't serve two masters and you can't be on two platforms. And this is the point. When our illustrious prophet, Noble Drawley, told us to enforce the Constitution for the United States, right? Mm-hmm. If people don't know African culture, they'll look at that one-dimensional. They'll look at it as the precepts that are structured in the Constitution for the United States and not look at that conjoined with the constitutional man principles of the Gnostic wisdom and the Sufi principles that are at the foundation of all religion, which is your Constitution. The knowledge of your relationship to the womb of your mother and how she made you and what she made you of, in harmony with the cosmology of nature, the what we like to refer to loosely as the planetary positions. The astronomy of the astrology, the positions of the planets, the elements that you use to build your temple or of the soul of man, etc. That is the Constitution. So when you're enforcing the Constitution, you're enforcing the traditions and customs, because the documents are only what you call civil level abstracts of the traditional cosmological constitutions of your customs and traditions of the customs and culture of Asia, Africa the foundation of life.
But if we had a business that was, we went by whatever the
As soon as you're saying business, you're saying trade.
Okay, so
trade. Now you're back on. Now here we go back.
Trade not what we have done.
Now that is secured by treaty and constitution. Here we're back to that.
So how should one operate?
Now, isn't this why we've been trying to get people to come together to recognize what nationality is, how it functions on the political platform? The venues that relate to it are called consular. It's diversity. The diversity is where that distinction line is made. That's how nations communicate with each other. That is the venue. But you know, and I know how much negative criticism that has been put out there in relationship to the consular position when that's Article 3, Section 2 of that Constitution for international trade and controversy.
So we should be an international entity.
That's what it is.
Okay.
See, this is the whole point. They keep treating the established law as if it's alien, as if it's an intrusion, and as if someone who brings it up, like conscious Moors, like they're out of order, rather than charging the criminals with treason. And the fact that they keep asking us to justify the truth, and some to apologize for telling the truth. Well, explain yourself. You're attempting to exercise the right. Explain yourself.
Well,
meaning that if you enforce the law, that is the platform. The platform for doing business is called international law platforms. You're doing international trade. The Constitution for the United States is an international document.
Well, here's another question. They said they asked a seer, I guess, dignitaries to help ADOS, that all caps ADOS. I don't know if that's something that, I don't know. I've seen that before. I'm not sure what it means.
If they present any acronyms, tell the people what the acronyms is.
Please tell us.
No, tell the people what the acronyms are.
Us what the ADOS stands for, because you're asking me to ask Grand Sheik.
Because the people must know.
He said he wouldn't help them because they are not worthy. I would have asked the Grand Sheik first, but I was nervous on contact him. Now he's live. I'm asking now, which is what? To help the ADOS. What is that? American, what is that?
Again?
Yeah, you have to tell us.
Because one thing everybody knows about me, I'm transparent.
Yeah, tell us what we're not gonna. American descendants. Oh, okay. ADOS means American descendants of slavery. That's right. Moors ain't that. We're not that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why he wouldn't. That's why Asir wouldn't help, because
of course because you're buying into a fraud.
Right. It's not.
It's a fraud. It's a diversion, just like Black Lives Matter. Sounds like it's for you when it's designed to bury you.
Right.
Now, when you're conscious, you recognize it, and when you can read, and this is back to the seriousness of our people being able to read, and it's also the seriousness. Whereas our people need to understand when they're being guided or misguided by outside infiltrated forces that will present platforms that appear to be helpful when they're designed to rebury you.
Yeah,
no. Moors are not slaves. Slave is Slovakian. It's an identity, not a status. Connotatively, it's presented as a status, but it has nothing to do with Moors. Moors have been bound freemen. They're not slaves.
Earlier on, somebody wanted to know who's the white man.
White man is a legal status that actually relates to the sovereign of the land and the ruler of the land, having nothing to do with complexion. Which is why in 1854, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with the convention of the Whiggamore parties, members of the conscience Whigs who were breaking off from the Cottonwigs with disputes they were having among each other, chose to claim the estates of the Moors and thus claim to be white people. Because by law, that the hybrid Europeans could not be free white people. That's a fact. It's a law status. Has nothing to do with complexion of skin.
So Jaleel Hughes says, how do we use the consular courts to reestablish trade routes?
Now, this is back to organization. Now, so if you, me, or anyone else come back on, like when Jawali said, help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government. Well, constitutions are the platforms on an international basis on how international trade and business is done. The enforcement of it is the securing and the protection of it. They keep looking for these things outside of those principles, which is what the problem is. Do you see the point?
I see.
So it's sort of like, and this is back to where people ask you for what you've already given them, which means they're not studying the principles, or they don't have cognate faith in them. Do you understand? If you ask people about Social Security, retirement program, they put all their strength, their power, their investment in it. Talk about Constitution and treaty, they keep dismissing it as someone's interesting idea. That's the platform. That is the platform.
Okay. I don't know what about them. Okay. Somebody's saying, what about the Cherokee freedman? Isn't that the same as what? Not sure what they mean.
Cherokee. So you're talking Anayanwea. So what about the Anayanwea? So the question, they asked them to type back. My question in response to that for qualification. So tell me, in response, what about the Anayanwea?
Okay. Well, hopefully they'll
Anayanwea.
Here's a question while they're maybe responding. Taj, can you explain the esoteric meaning of being an Aquarius? I would say Aquarian in the Aquarius in the Aquarian age. I, like you, are one as well, beloved.
Well, you have the problem that we all have, and that is trying to stay grounded enough for people to accept us, so we won't seem to be absolutely out to lunch. Because we are a little bit, what you call, eccentric.
To see things in another way. Trey Bay said, what contracts do we set forth through the consulate to establish international organizations? It's already established. It's called coming back onto the platform. So what you see taking place today in the political realm, the hybrid Europeans are by force of arms trying to continue to make themselves relevant while the world is starting to dismiss them. I say to you and to us, pay attention to every detail, etc., and prepare yourself to take, control and cognizance of your own affairs by studying those things necessary to make our people better nationals in their own political jurisdiction. But the platforms already exist. And so what you see going on right now, the hybrid Europeans are trying to spoil the platforms because they already know that they're losing power. Platforms already exist. Now you're talking about back to what we talked about when we did our last session, Dr. Naila, understanding jurisdiction. Okay. So go back over those issues. And also to help family members who might want to examine the question that you just asked. Again, this is why we tell people as an interim, as a point of reference for study, but not limited to that, is to look at House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, June the 5th of 1933, and then also look at speeches that were made on the floor of the Congress relative to the U.S. bankruptcy and one particular representative called James Traficant, and then analyze things that he said and do some research into those areas, particularly when he talks about the hypothecation and he's talking about the conversion of
uh, um, allodial titles into mortgages and deeds of 1913, and not just the things that are talked about in books that are one of the books that most of people read called Jekyll Island issue, etc. You notice that they don't talk about the conversion of estates. They keep talking about the gold and silver issue. And at the same time, they still don't tell the people that the United States is a trading corporation. They still imply that it is a nation state when in fact it is not. So this is back to what we talked about earlier, Dr. Naila, where they're telling some truths, but they don't tell all the truth because they still are trying to control our estate.
The Grand Sheik, can Grand Sheik elaborate on the Treasury? This is from Nicola Stephan. Can Grand Sheik elaborate on the Treasury threatening to assume control of the United States Postal Service for credit, debt, and its consequences upon living men and women if that should happen?
All right. Well, guess what? They're going to do it anyway. They've already integrated the Federal Reserve, who were delicensed a year and a half ago, into the U.S. Treasury. This is a battle that you're seeing that's going to come more and more open to the public as to why they've already tried to assassinate Donald Trump. I think it's 26 times already. You won't see that in the mainstream news. And also, whereas the so-called stimuluses that he's doing is really because they're ramming the private commercial paper into the ground. However, I also say take it with a grain of salt, etc., because they're still arguing over our estate. So when you're looking at things in that area, keep that in mind as an ongoing operation presently, and analyze that and see what you get out of it.
From the standpoint of the Postal Service, though?
Because because now you're getting back to the issue where people are looking at the Postal Service as superseding the other political jurisdictional venues of the United States and being so-called the legitimate operations under the United States.
What about with like the Postmaster General? Wasn't that supposed to be
the whole thing? But remember, they sold that private too. That's part of the operations. It's all corrupt. It's all corrupt.
So there is no legitimate.
The people must take the government back. They've got, we keep looking for them to do what they're supposed to do. They're de facto. When we opened up, Dr. Naila, and I've said this constantly, and I'm saying this now, the questions are legitimate, but can you see the nature of the people having not yet accepted or understanding what de facto is? And they keep looking for de facto platforms to fix something, and it's not going to come from them. It's going to come from the people. If the people want their liberties back, they are going to have to recognize their birthright. That's where the cure is. It will be in nothing that the hybrid European controls. Nothing. Not one thing. If they're involved in it, it's contaminated. If they've touched it, it is dead in law. Not opinion, it's fact.
Ellie Fancier responded about the other question. They were asking if the Cherokee freedmen are Moors.
Of course, Cherokee is Anayanwea. Most of us are Anayanwea. My family's Anayanwea.
The real ones, right?
Well, yeah, because Cherokee is just a corruption. Just like Choctaw simply means chocolate people. Our people really need to know that this ain't India.
I don't know about that.
We're called Indians, but this ain't India.
Okay. So your dead grandpa wants up. What a name. Okay. How do we challenge government jurisdiction over the land, or did I?
By challenging yourself, starting with challenging everything that you used to believe. Start dumping things and rendering under the Caesar, the Romans, what's theirs. That's how you do it. Let's kind of add to that. It's difficult, I comprehend. We have to stop supporting the agencies and institutions that were never there to help you. They were only there to bleed you. You've got to pull the straws out your neck. Stop calling them necklaces and decoration. They're not jewelry. Your relationships to the hybrid Europeans are based on parasiticism, not based on public service. So bring out your best minds, bring out your true spirituality, and start exercising it. That is your cure. It will not be from them. It's not in them to do right.
Here's a question. Okay.
John 8:44.
Next question is Grand Sheik and Dr. G. Question: can you speak to those who may not know how to locate more science physicians, in parentheses doctors, around the area they domicile instead of trusting European solutions?
Now, good. This is the answer. And back to what is commonly said. Collectively, as a people, we've been constantly funding institutions that has been claiming the gods of the heavens and the earth, the powers that they possess, the prophets that they have sent, what they're going to do, what they're not going to do, how to interpret the Vedas, how to interpret the Quran, how to interpret the Bible. Certainly something as mundane as earth operations, we should be able to handle that, shouldn't we?
Yep.
So if we have made the claims of knowing gods and loving gods who we do not see, then certainly we can love and comprehend the rules of law that governs our brothers and our sisters by the day. Therefore, if we can talk about the constitutions of the heavens, certainly we can talk about the constitutions of the earth. So how dare us claim the love of God we do not see, and love not our brothers and sisters whom we see by the day. So it is, the common law rides those same tracks. So let us get on track.
Thank you very much. Let me see what else is coming up here. Let me get back to here. I am appreciative of them. All right. Questions. Government, not your adversary. Red Mars. Person was in a peace. Benjamin Franklin. Bridge says Benjamin Franklin is on the record admitting that the black race is the largest nation on the planet. He also admitted blacks were in Europe when they arrived. Someone was asking a question about explaining how there are only 7 days in a year. Can you ask Brother Taj, Devin Dodson, how is it 7 days in a year according to science?
Easily, according to science, name them. Just say it. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Are there any more?
That's it.
It just cycles. So now let's go back to more science. He says Moors measure time in cycle ages. So if a cycle is a circle, so how many days are on the circle?
7.
You see?
Circle 7.
There you go.
Circle 7.
Meaning that use your common sense and get back in harmony with nature.
Okay. I know someone didn't get attorney question. Can you speak to those? Oh, he did that. Gosh, he answered the question 3 times. Okay. There's a lot of 7:30 sleepy-headed Moors versus the true woke Moors. I don't know what that means. Someone wants to know, can you nationalize your child? If so, what's the process?
The condition of the mother is the condition of the child. Redeem the mother and you can redeem the nation. Like Jurali said, I've given you more than enough to save yourselves. Now go out and redeem your people.
Yeah. Okay.
And if I could just get you all thinking again, you'd save yourselves.
You can respond. We know that this is cool. House of Reawakening Minds. Do we have schools for our Moorish children? Am not registering my child into this B system. Let us know if online.
Again, yes.
Grand Sheik is
Yes. She's been having on for about 7 years now, more.
I would put it.
So yes.
What is the? I can put it down there.
So Grand Sheik is Tarik Bey.
Right. Let me see.
And more school for children.
That's what it's called.
Yes. And I think we have flyers around here because we passed them out before.
Well, I don't have them here at the House of Reawakening.
So go on the website and look up Grand Sheik Tarik Bey. That's a double R, Tarik Bey. Burrryah. Yes.
Bey. School for Moorish children.
Yep. Yeah. Online school. And keep in mind, when you deal with the hybrids, when they talk about the General Education Board that dumbed our children down in the first place, notice that the founders are John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates. And don't think that the other Gates, his descendant, aren't trying to poison your children with needles, because they absolutely are.
Yeah, I'll set Atlantis Big. Yeah, the school is an online school and it's been operating for about the last 7 years, and now is the perfect time to
you daggone right.
Yeah,
you better.
Yeah, we only have,
Stop sacrificing your babies.
Yeah.
And those of you already know here, what we've been trying to do is trying to get things done here at the House of Reawakening Minds, and we've been sacrificing both time and labor. And Brother Abdullah and Brother Shem and Sister Tamara have been working hard to try to set up the operations of the consulate at 602, inclusive of the House of Reawakening Minds. There are 2 venues operating at the building, so make sure that you support the house, because the house has been supporting you.
We have about 1,400 people online.
Yes.
I want to thank the 5 people there have been 5 people who have said, while we were on, have given us the donation. 5 or 6.
Much appreciated.
But there's like 1,400 people online. So
yes.
If they sent $1, the ones that, we appreciate you. We don't beg, but we do appreciate your
the
support.
reality, while the transitions are being made, we still have to operate because we're limited. We're limited because we're still under occupation. But while the transition is being made, and also contact Dr. Naila, and I'm going to suggest to you, and you're going to know it very soon, because pretty soon you're not going to be able to get these. Yeah. And it's going to be more difficult as you're trying to get them even now.
It's going to be more expensive. It's going up $10 last month.
This is why I see. Let me say something to you honestly.
10 notes a month.
One of the reasons why you don't see me talking about it all the time is because I understand telegraphing punches. Because I know when I say something that immediately the priesthood is going to come after me and then go after people. That's why you don't see me talking. I hope that they listen to you and try to save themselves and their families. And even then it's not going to be enough, because I already knew that was going to happen. This is why but if I say an alarm, and as soon as they go out there, making waves, in short order, they're not going to get anything. I would prefer that they use intelligence and recognize that our intentions have always been for the good of the people, and to be self-motivated to act if you get the point.
And I do. I appreciate it because I appreciate that you kept saying to do this, and I was so grateful when the opportunity came around. The book that I've been talking about, Neotech. I'm looking on Amazon right now. It's one that popped up. Somebody's selling one for $186.96. But
So, or like I told you, order my other ones.
I already ordered yours while we were doing the live. I see where someone's selling one for as little as $39.99.
Get it.
Some $34.99.
Order it.
You need to, there's 7 that are available starting at $34.95. There's 2, one for $34, one for $39, one that goes up to $50, $55, $59, $186, $181, $186, $183. So
listeners of the house,
get the book.
Get them all now while you can,
get
because
the ones you can afford.
Yes, it's the knowledge that's important. And keep in mind, because I don't like to do the alarm thing. You already know that.
Right.
I just hope that people are listening, because if I could have gotten people to listen to some of these things 25 years ago, we'd be so much farther ahead.
Yeah.
However, because you got to remember that the hybrids already know what we're doing and know why. There's nothing that we do from an organizational position that they don't infiltrate as an normal order of operations. Knowing how they operate, use your best mind, be honorable, and be active, be proactive. Try to get out of the habit of being reactive, because you lose. You do. And I don't like to play the alarm game, but the people are in more trouble than they really even imagine that they are. Hopefully that some of the things that we've been telling them, that they're really going to be self-inspired to be active, to study.
Can you hold this book up? People are asking about the book.
This is the book, Neotech.
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Higher. Yeah, there you go. Neotech. Frank.
Do I need to put it closer?
They like, no, go back, back up. There, they can see it. Neotech. Let's see how thick it is. Yeah, it's a thick book. Neotech. Frank R. Wallace. I think you see it. Okay. So, there we go. You want to get that book.
Now remember, and this is one of the things that they always do, because while you think they're silent, they watch us and they always plot on how to counter us. And this is people on our side as well as the hybrid Europeans. Whenever we try to wake the people up, understand that they're going to attack. Understand that's normal operations. And for those who are listening here tonight at the House of Reawakening Minds, if you intend to get this book, whatever's available, get it now, because I'm telling you, as soon as this gets out, they're going to be out there jumping, trying to make it non-available. I'm telling you how they're going to do. So don't say that we didn't tell you. We can't make you act. We just trust that you love yourself enough to act. And our people invest fortunes into sneakers, but they just don't believe in books anymore. However, we're encouraging you to go ahead and start taking care of your responsibilities.
Yeah, we thank you so much. We thank you for those who support us and tune in regularly. Tune in to Office Hours with Dr. G on Tuesday. And ironically, Grand Sheik, my guest, is going to be an expat that domiciles in China and is bridging the gap between China for Moors around the globe and China to be able to do imports. So he's changing.
We need the paradigm.
And so he's going to be my guest on Tuesday. And he's also, he does it through a lot of things, through fashion and so forth. But he speaks fluent Chinese and writes and reads fluent Chinese as well as Moorish Latin and English. So he's going to be my guest on Tuesday night, and it should be a very exciting.
Oh, beautiful. Because we need that, and also that venue of information and thinking should be adopted into the consular venues. That's what the consular venues are for.
Yeah.
See, and even like when people
National
hear the structural phrase "out of chamber," most people aren't aware that out of chamber is in place universally for receiving diplomatics and ambassadors. They think it's just, higher degrees of more science within the temples. No, it has a political function.
Okay.
And for those of you who doubt that, do a little bit of research and then recognize how many people who should have been telling you these things long time ago have actually not been friends of Noble Drew Ali, but have actually been in such organizations to stagnate you from learning these things, which is why we have these problems today. Well, Noble Drew Ali brought this to us over 110 years, 110, 11 years. And here we are getting caught with all of these sideline economic and social problems that should already been addressed decades ago. However, we're still breathing, so we ain't totally dead. So something can be done.
Well, listen, we thank you. We thank you as always. We thank you for your wisdom. We thank you for your knowledge. We thank you for your love, and we thank you for your straightforwardness. We know that you are forever our Grand Sheik, and we thank you for giving your time. Thank you so much for tuning in to House of Real Awakening Minds with our National Grand Sheik, and hope you know now.
Yeah.
It's not a request. It's a notice.
Yes.
Until next week, we thank you so much.
All right. The house supports you. Support the house.
Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.